My sister accused my husband of an affair, and my parents believed her. 2 years later, her fiancé exposed her lies and cheating. My sister told my parents that my husband had an affair with her, and they believed her. 2 years later, her fiancé discovered she was cheating and that she had made up the entire narrative. It's difficult to know where to begin, but I feel compelled to get this off my chest and, maybe, find some clarity. I apologize if this comes across as rambling. There is so much to unpack. Hopefully, you people can point me in the correct way because I'm at a loss. I am 30 years old and have been married to the love of my life, Jake, 34, for 8 beautiful years. We have 2 lovely children, a 6-year-old girl and a 4-year-old son. Life was very close to perfect. We had a comfortable home, a consistent schedule, and a profound bond that I believed was unbreakable. Our days were filled with the normal ups and downs of family life, but I couldn't have been happier. But everything changed 2 years ago, thanks to my older sister Lily. Lily, who is also 34, began on a similar route to mine, but our lives have taken completely different twists. To put it mildly, her relationship history has been fraught with difficulties. She had been alone for a long time, and there was a very good reason for it. As much as it pains me to admit it, Lily is a bit of a red flag in terms of relationships. Her actions can only be described as those of a neurotic narcissist. She has a history of destroying her relationships, frequently driving people away with her unstable and deceptive behavior. Lily's relationships always seem to start out well, but they never last. She has a habit of becoming very intense too quickly, and then things begin to unravel. I've seen it happen several times. She'll meet someone, they'll begin dating, and then she'll start picking fights over little matters or become so possessive that the guy feels suffocated. Soon enough, it's over, and she's left wondering why she can't find someone who will remain around. It's difficult to witness, especially since Lily frequently takes her emotions out on me. She would come over to my apartment and complain about not being able to find a man like Jake. There was clearly a great deal of resentment. She'd say things like, "You've found a man? Why can't I find somebody like Jake?" I tried not to take offense since I knew she was in a horrible place, but it was difficult not to feel like her words were aimed at me. Despite everything, I still love my sister. I'd always hoped she'd find the man of her dreams and be happy. I even tried to set her up with Jake's friend once, thinking they'd make a wonderful match. But Lily's unusual and unsettling actions rapidly put a stop to that notion. She was so severe and dominating that I recognized it wasn't worth jeopardizing our friendship for her. Despite all of this, I remained hopeful that Lily would finally find happiness. Unfortunately, it was evident that Lily did not feel the same way about me. Jake and I had a big family cookout at our parents' house 2 years ago to celebrate our 6th wedding anniversary. It had been a while since the entire family had gotten together, so everyone was having a great time. Our children were playing with their relatives, and the air was full of laughter and happiness. It was one of those rare moments when everything seemed perfect, and I was surrounded by the people I cared about the most. As the evening progressed, Lily took me aside. At first, I assumed she was going to make me a heartfelt anniversary wish. She complimented me, and I thanked her, shocked at her genuine tone. I asked her what she'd been up to lately, and because I knew she had a new boyfriend, I also questioned about that. But instead of the pleasant conversation I expected, Lily's tone shifted. She gazed at me with peculiar intensity, and the next words she said caught me completely off guard. She stated that after Jake and I married, they secretly had an affair for a period. At first, I thought it was a weird joke and chuckled, but Lily was dead serious. She claimed that after the wedding, Jake continued texting her, and what began as benign, getting-to-know-you exchanges quickly evolved into intense emotional conversations. According to Lily, Jake told her that he and I were constantly fighting and bickering about minor issues. She claimed he'd ask if they might meet, which is when the affair allegedly began. Her statements made me feel ill. I couldn't believe Jake, who had always been committed to me and our family, would be unfaithful. Lily explained that she had kept this a secret all along but could no longer pretend. The way she delivered it, so quietly and confidently, shook me to my core more than the actual news. I briefly considered all of the possible options. Did Jake actually cheat on me? And with my own sister? Were we supposed to be separated now? How about the kids? It took me a while to process my ideas, but then I asked Lily if she had any proof that Jake couldn't get away with lying. That is where she faltered. Lily said she had a lot of evidence, but as her sister, I should believe her, with or without it. That's when I realized, Lily was lying. She could trick Mom and Dad, but I had been watching her for years. I could immediately detect when she was lying. She burst into tears when she realized I could be onto her. Then came her lecture, which included comments like, "I cannot believe you don't trust me," and "I told you for your own good." Lily then went on to tell our parents the same tale. Soon, all of our friends and family surrounded us, and Lily began shouting at Jake about how he had cheated on me with her. She even alleged that, despite her refusal to participate, he blackmailed her. My hubby was just as perplexed as I was. At first, he assumed this was an unfunny joke. However, when Lily began screaming like crazy in front of everyone, the situation became quite serious. I hoped my folks would assist me with damage control. After all, even if Lily's narrative were accurate, I would have been crushed. To my amazement, my parents sided with Lily without regard for our circumstances. Dad screamed at Jake, accusing him of playing with Lily's feelings. I felt abandoned. My own sister confessed to me that she had an affair with my husband of 6 years. Even though I knew that wasn't true, no wife enjoys hearing this type of thing. Furthermore, if her narrative was true, my father was more concerned with Lily's feelings than my own, a wife and mother who would have lost her husband. When we got home that day, Jake and I talked about everything. I trusted my husband and knew he would never betray me. Before you think I'm gullible, let me warn you that Lily has a history of lying. She has previously wrecked countless relationships with petty lies. In truth, Jake's pal ended their relationship because she accused him of cheating on her at random. She would set her own belongings throughout the apartment and then ask him about if he had brought any other girls. This would lead to screaming bouts, and when he was fatigued, Mom would tell him it was just a test. The situation with us simply confirmed this was a trend for Lily, so I chose to believe my husband. The next days were the worst of my life. My parents refused to hear our side of the tale, preferring to trust Lily's version without any evidence. Our previously close-knit family was broken. Jake and I found ourselves alone, and the atmosphere at family gatherings grew unpleasant. My parents treated me with distrust, while Jake was completely ignored. Lily, on the other hand, appeared to delight in the turmoil she had caused. She played the victim, taking up the attention and pity of everyone around her. It was as if she relished witnessing the devastation she had inflicted in my life. The more I attempted to defend myself and Jake, the more she distorted the story to portray us as monsters. I attempted to contact my parents to explain that there was no proof of Lily's assertions, but it was ineffective. They'd made up their minds, and their commitment to Lily was solid. Mom even accused me of being in denial and choosing Jake above my own sister, which shattered my heart. I couldn't comprehend how they could so easily abandon me, how they could blindly believe Lily's falsehoods. Eventually, the tension reached its breaking point. Jake and I made the difficult decision to detach ourselves from my family for our own mental health and the sake of our children's well-being. It was a difficult decision, but we couldn't keep living in the shadow of such a painful falsehood. This eventually became our new normal. As I mentioned, it was difficult but not impossible. I recognized that I didn't need my parents' approval for everything in my life, and if they wanted to believe Lily's lie, then so be it. But just when I thought the drama was over, something happened to shake things up again. I came across a post on Facebook unexpectedly, and guess what? Lily became engaged. She had shared a series of photos with her new fiancé, a man named Mark, along with a lengthy, heartfelt caption about how she had met the love of her life. She told how Mark entered her life at what she believed was the most difficult time she had ever experienced, a time of pain and betrayal. Ironic, eh? Reading those sentences caused my stomach to churn. The hypocrisy was staggering. Lily had portrayed herself as a victim, employing the same lies she had spoken to elicit compassion and admiration from our extended family and friends. As I browsed through the comments, I noticed that many of our family, who had largely supported her during the turmoil, were praising her and extending their support. Some even made snide, passive-aggressive statements addressed directly at me, such as, "Good for you for getting past that toxicity. You do not need that in your life." It was infuriating. These folks had no idea what had transpired, yet they were ready to congratulate Lily on her alleged courage and tenacity. I felt a similar sensation of betrayal, not only from Lily, but from the entire family, which had decided to believe her falsehoods without questioning. It felt as if they had entirely eliminated me from their life, while continuing to support someone who had only caused grief and destruction. What concerned me even more was Lily's engagement to a man who had no notion what kind of person she was. I couldn't help but feel sad for Mark, knowing that he was being deceived by the same lies that had destroyed my family. I wondered whether Lily had ever told him the truth about what she had done, or if she had continued to weave her web of deception to trap him as well. I was tempted to reach out to Mark and warn him about Lily's true personality. But I immediately realized that it was not my place to meddle with their relationship. Mark would have to discover the truth on his own, just like I did. Still, I couldn't ignore the sense of dread that came with knowing Lily was once again manipulating those around her for her personal gain. In the days that followed, I tried to get the news of Lily's engagement out of my mind, but it was difficult. Suddenly, I began to notice a series of missed calls from an unknown number. I ignored it at first because I assumed it was spam. But the calls kept coming. I didn't have time to pick up because I was so busy with work and kids. Finally, during a break at work, I decided to respond. On the other end of the line, I was welcomed by a screaming Lily. She hurled every insult and slur she could think of at me. It was like a torrent of rage, unfiltered and untamed. I tried to ask her what was going on, but she refused to let me speak. After what seemed like an eternity of listening to her rant, I was finally able to convince her to pause long enough to explain what had happened and why she was so angry. There was a little hush on the other end before she screamed, "How could you claim to be innocent after what you've done?" Before I could react, she hung up. I was left in a trance, trying to make sense of what had just occurred. My mind was spinning with options, but none made sense. What could I have done to make Lily so angry? I had stayed out of her life, given her the privacy she clearly desired, and done nothing to provoke her. I could only think of one person who might have some insight into this situation: my Uncle Tom. He was one of the few family members I still communicated with, and he was always a voice of reason in the midst of the insanity. I called him, thinking he could shed some light on the situation. Uncle Tom did not disappoint. When I recounted what had transpired, he revealed what Lily had cleverly left out. Apparently, her fiancé, Mark, had called off the engagement. What's the reason? He had discovered the alleged affair between Lily and Jake through family rumors. Mark, being the wonderful guy he was, had been looking into a disagreement he had spotted between Lily and myself. When Mark found out about the affair, he was naturally outraged. The trouble was that he didn't realize it was all a lie, a fiction Lily cooked up to seek attention and sympathy. Things took an even more dramatic turn just before the engagement was called off. Mark, Lily's fiancé, had sensed that something was wrong with their relationship. Lily's unpredictable conduct had caused some concerns for him, and he couldn't escape the suspicion that there was more to the story. Mark, motivated by his suspicions, decided to check Lily's phone. What he discovered shocked everyone: Lily had been cheating on him. She'd been meeting up with a guy she met on a dating app, and their interactions weren't simply casual chatter. Mark, who was wealthy and seemed ideal in Lily's eyes, was someone she refused to lose. Lily had no choice but to come honest. She admitted to Mark that she had no affair with Jake and that the entire thing was made up. But, rather than saving her relationship, her confession backfired. She did not deny having discussions with the guy on the dating app. Mark was horrified, not only by the affair, but also by the deception and the lengths Lily had gone to in order to carry it out. It presented Lily in an even more negative light, and Mark wanted nothing to do with her after that. After Mark called off the engagement, Lily's life began to disintegrate. Her lies were now public knowledge, and those who had previously backed her began to distance themselves. The folks who had previously believed her story about Jake and me now questioned everything. Their caustic remarks and supportive letters faded when they discovered the extent of Lily's deception. My parents, who had so easily chosen her side 2 years ago, were left stunned by the truth. Despite the remorse and sorrow I feel for my sister, I know that the best thing for my family right now is to stay away from all of this toxic drama. We've gone through enough, and now I need to focus on protecting my husband, children, and myself from future danger. I'm happy for the clarity that has resulted from all of this, even if it has been extremely hard to achieve. I'd also like to thank everyone who read my article and offered their support and suggestions. It's been a challenging trip, but strangers' compassion and understanding have helped make it bearable. I am grateful to you all for allowing me to see things more clearly and giving me the courage to do what is best for my family. Update 2. Hello, everyone. The last week has been quite stressful, so my family and I decided to take a much-needed mini vacation. It was a nice opportunity for us to clear our heads and refocus on each other after what had happened. I also spent some time reading over all of your comments on my prior postings, and I just wanted to say thank you. Your insights and encouragement have really improved my understanding of the situation. One thing that really struck me was the number of comments about Lily's weird fixation with my husband Jake. Now that you've brought it to my attention, I see that there were always warning flags, but I just didn't notice them at the time. When Jake and I first started dating, Lily had a lot to say. More than I expected. She would always call him brilliant and dashing, which looked like innocent praise, but they were frequently followed by comments that now seem strange, such as how I got him or how he was so out of my league. I dismissed it as her typical mocking, but thinking back, there could have been more to it. Anyway, going on, I must say that my parents have not ceased attempting to reach us. They've called and texted us hundreds of times, and while I'm still unhappy about what happened, I've decided to allow them to come visit us. I understand that their primary motivation is to visit the children, and I have accepted that. After all, I've decided that I would not deprive my children of their grandparents, even if I am not ready to fully reconcile with them myself. While my parents may not have been the best at supporting me, they have always been loving grandparents, and my children adore them. The visit will be difficult, and I'm still unsure how I'll react to seeing them face to face after everything that has transpired, but I'm prepared to try for the sake of my children. I will create limits and preserve my own mental health, but I cannot ignore the attachment they have with their grandparents. Hopefully, this visit will provide some clarity on how to go from here. Thank you again for all of your help and suggestions. I'll keep you posted on how things progress. Update 3. Hello everyone, I hope you are doing better. I wanted to provide an update on how things have been since my last post. My parents did come to visit us, and while I was concerned about how it would go, I have to admit it went better than I imagined. Things were awkward at first, as I expected, but my children immediately broke the ice. They were overjoyed to see their grandparents again, and their enthusiasm helped to alleviate the tension in the room. It was evident that they missed them as much as my parents did. As we settled in, the kids innocently asked where Aunt Lily was. It was a question I expected to come up at some point, and it elicited an uncomfortable stillness. We all avoided the subject at the moment, attempting to keep the atmosphere light. Later, while the kids were busy, I decided to ask my parents directly where she was. They informed me Lily had returned to their home after a long absence and wanted to apologize to me. I found it difficult to take it seriously, however. After everything she'd done, an apology seemed pointless. Furthermore, Mark, her ex-fiancé, deserved the most sincere apologies after everything she had put him through. I advised that instead of wasting time apologizing, they consider enrolling her in treatment. The way she acted, lying so brazenly and destructively, was not a simple mistake. She acted like a habitual liar, and at times, it appeared she was on the verge of being labeled a psychopath. Some may even claim she is one. If she is to heal from this condition, she must seek expert help. Interestingly, Jake and Mark have developed an unexpected bond throughout this process. They began hanging together and learned that they had many common interests. Jake keeps Mark informed about what's going on with us, and it's been great to see them both support each other in various ways. Mark, being the mature individual that he is, has begun to move on with his life. He did not deserve what he went through, but as humans, all we can do is move on and attempt to find peace. Overall, I believe we are on the route to a resolution. Things will never be the same, but I am hopeful that they can improve. If the world works in our favor, we may not be able to return to the way things were, but we may be able to reach a satisfactory point, one in which we can re-establish some trust and move forward without the weight of the past holding us back. We've learned the value of open communication, the perils of leaping to conclusions, and the strength of forgiveness, both giving and receiving it. While we are not completely recovered yet, we believe we are on the right track. Thank you again, Reddit, for your encouragement and guidance at this difficult time. Your opinions have been important in guiding us through this challenging circumstance. We'll continue to take things one day at a time, focusing on our mental health and our children's well-being as we move forward. My parents favored my twin sister. So much that they spent my wedding budget on her, so I cut them off after refusing my mother's selfish request. I, 23F, have a twin sister named Allison with whom I am not on good terms. I'm not even on speaking terms with her or my parents. Despite how I've been treated in the past, we used to be on good terms, but I've kept my distance for the last 2 years. They hadn't bothered to contact me either, until recently. Allison is 12 minutes older than me and is therefore the golden kid by default. My parents only wanted one child because that was what they had planned for, and they didn't have the resources to support two. By the time they discovered it was twins, it was too late, and my mother did not want to take any chances. In high school, I learned about this from my intoxicated uncle at a Thanksgiving celebration. That was pretty much the day I gave up trying to win my folks over. They did what seemed most natural in those circumstances. They had 2 children but chose to adore only one. That was Allison, not me. Allison and I had an incredible sibling rivalry from childhood. To impress our parents, I would try to outdo all she could do. But the more I achieved, the more they appeared to despise me for outperforming their golden child. To be honest, Allison had no interest in competing with me. She was only looking for validation. She claimed to be concerned about the rivalry, but her main skill was manipulation. She was brilliant at convincing people that she was offended when I outdid her. This resulted in many, including our parents, relatives, and even some classmates, supporting her feelings while tearing me down to help her feel better. Finally, The competition provided me with good grades and several extracurricular accomplishments to demonstrate my superiority. Meanwhile, Allison captured my parents' attention, affirmation, and sympathy. I was always cast as the villain, making her feel inadequate. Looking back, I don't think I'd swap what I've achieved, but I wish I had rubbed my success in her face more at the time. 2 years ago, we turned 21. By then, we'd both graduated. Allison from a conventional college and me from one of the state's best business schools. I was the valedictorian and received a scholarship, so my parents saved a lot of money on my education. Call me crazy, but I honestly believed my parents would be proud of me. They were not. Instead, they concentrated solely on Allison and her troubles. Allison had barely made ends meet and was looking for work, only to be turned down again. I, on the other hand, was already working from home as an intern for a corporation. Despite my accomplishments, my parents did not bother to congratulate me. Instead, they were absorbed with concern for Allison's future. I was not surprised, but rather disappointed. I was still living with my parents and hadn't saved enough money to move out, so I chose to keep my feelings to myself. But after our 21st birthday, I couldn't anymore. I expected them to accomplish something significant for us. However, the day before our birthday, I learned that everyone had left me at home alone. All they left me was a note saying they were going to the beach with Allison and her friends and would be back in a few days. I vividly recall being completely devastated when I read that note. They had taken Allison and her pals on a beach trip, but all I received was a happy birthday card and a $50 gift card. Many aspects of my childhood had been unfair, but here was where I drew the line. It was so disheartening and callous that I decided to leave that day and never look back. I had a few friends who were ready to let me stay with them until I could find and afford my own place. It wouldn't take long because the firm where I was interning was likely to recruit me full-time once the internship concluded. I only needed a place to reside for 2 months at the most. I packed my belongings and moved in with a friend without informing my parents or sister, and I have not looked back since. They didn't miss me enough to want me to come back. They did phone me on my birthday, the day after I moved out, but not to wish me. They said they'd be returning shortly and recommended I hire a plumber to fix the tap. I informed them that I was no longer living at home and had moved out, hoping that this information would elicit a response from them. But no such luck. My folks seemed fine with it, and Allison didn't mind. That was it. That was my final proper conversation with my family. Since then, I haven't seen them or heard from them again. My friends occasionally told me about Allison, which kept me up to date on her life, but that was about it. They knew nothing about my parents, and my parents knew nothing about me. I've worked hard for the past 2 years and finally got my own place. It's hardly a mansion, but it's a lovely apartment in a desirable neighborhood. The rent is reasonable for my wage, which is fantastic because most people my age haven't been able to accomplish this as quickly. I'm pleased with how my life has turned out, and I've done my best to keep my family out of my thoughts. Allison recently married a businessman nearly 10 years older than her and is now living it out in California. I thought everything was fine in my family until 2 days ago, when I received a call from my uncle. He told me I needed to come visit my parents right away because they had been in a terrible car accident and wanted to see me. I went to the hospital as soon as possible since, of course, I'm not so heartless. When I arrived, I discovered that they had already been in the hospital for a few days and were recovering from their injuries. A truck had hit their car. They had survived, but with significant injuries. They didn't have health insurance because my father had always believed that if we looked after ourselves, we wouldn't need to go to the hospital. This was by far one of the most ridiculous opinions I've ever heard. My parents immediately phoned my sister, but she informed them that she would not return or assist them. Apparently, it was tacky of our parents to seek financial assistance from her wealthy husband so soon after their marriage. She did not want her spouse to think she was a gold digger. She also didn't want to travel back since she couldn't leave her home and 2 children, who weren't even her own. They were her husband's children from a previous marriage, but she was too preoccupied with playing happy family with her husband's family to see her own parents in the hospital following a tragic automobile accident. She couldn't have helped, even if she had wanted to. Without her husband's assistance, she would not have been able to purchase even the flight tickets back home. After all, she's now a stay-at-home parent, caring for children who aren't her own. So much for being the favorite daughter and golden child. I couldn't believe they didn't even call me first. It became even more irritating when my uncle informed me that my parents now expected me to finance their medical expenditures. It's a large sum of money, and if I agreed, I'd have a difficult time recovering financially. I don't want to spend so much money, especially on people who have never cared about me or shown me love throughout my life. I know they have other family members that can care for them. Even if I don't pay, somebody else will. However, my parents appear to be more worried with the shame of begging others for money. They warned me that borrowing money from others would be more humiliating than borrowing from me because they'd have to repay it sooner than I would. That is what they said when they asked me to pay their debts. They even assured that I would receive my money back quickly. I do not know what to do. I'm in a bad situation. I can either disgrace my parents by refusing to pay their medical bills and focusing on myself, or I may pay for them, lose my money, and then wait indefinitely for them to repay it. To be completely honest, I don't want to help them at all. We haven't spoken in 2 years, and I've had a horrible relationship with my family for as long as I can remember. They're like strangers to me now, so I don't feel inclined to assist them. But if I don't help, am I no better than Allison? That would be difficult to accept. Is it wrong of me not to want to help my parents pay their hospital costs after such a tragic accident? Update number 1. Hello there, I've decided not to aid my parents. It was a difficult decision to make, but I was confident that their bills would be handled by someone else. They have nothing to worry about. They just contacted me because they didn't want to ask their other relatives. They were overly egoistic. I haven't told them about my decision yet. How do you tell your family that you're not going to help your parents pay for their medical bills after such a tragic accident? It's been nearly 5 days since I met them. After reading the comments, I realized I was still subconsciously competing with Allison. Because she didn't help our parents, I felt compelled to step up and prove that I was the better daughter, or whatever. I guess I'll never be able to get rid of that competitive streak, no matter how hard I try. It's simply who I am now. The majority of the comments criticized my parents' lack of health insurance, and I agree. It was quite silly of my father to discourage it. If I had been a part of their lives, I would have ensured they were insured. He didn't even have his automobile insured since he believed he was such a good driver. They're happy the collision was caused by the truck driver, since else they'd have had to pay for the auto repairs themselves. As for my parents' financial position, which many of you have inquired about, I would say they are fine. They are neither rich nor poor. My father is the head of sales at his company, while my mother works in human resources at a smaller firm. Their combined salary is sufficient to allow them to live well, especially since they are no longer responsible for supporting me or Allison. Allison and I did not have to worry about money growing up, but we also couldn't afford to live extravagantly. We were middle class, and my parents still are. I don't see why they can't pay their own medical bills. If they can borrow money and promise to repay it eventually, they will undoubtedly be able to pay their own debts. They haven't provided me a clear explanation for why they can't, and I doubt I will ever find out. Update number 2. I told my parents that I would not fund their bills. They had been contacting me for the previous week, and yesterday I knew I couldn't just ignore them and wait till they were released from the hospital. So I answered their calls and told them I'd thought about it and didn't feel compelled to help. As expected, they did not take it well. My mother tore into me, shrieking as loudly as she could with her broken ribs. She called me ungrateful and used the usual slurs. My father, on the other hand, just told me that I was no longer his daughter and hung up once my mother had finished yelling. It didn't hurt like I expected. Honestly, it had been a long time since I felt like their daughter. I can't recall when I last felt loved by my parents. They hadn't spoken to me in 2 years, on purpose, because I moved out after they snubbed me on a significant birthday. In many ways, I had never truly had parents. I'm just going to keep living my life as I have for the last 2 years, and maybe even before that. This decision has little impact on me, despite my parents' expectations. Unfortunately, after my talk with my parents, my uncle called to give me another earful. I hung up after a few seconds because I didn't want this from him either. They can think anything they want about me. It doesn't matter anymore. Later, my uncle texted me to let me know that my parents might still ask other family members for money. He also indicated that my parents had decided to use the wedding fund they had put up for me and Allison. They had already spent more than half of it on Allison's wedding, and what remained was squandered on a trip to Europe. That's why they had almost little savings left and couldn't meet their medical bills. So, the riddle is solved. Of course, my uncle told me all of this to make me feel terrible, but all I felt was relief that I hadn't wasted my hard-earned money on their expenses. They had carelessly wasted their own cash, which was not my fault. It was not my responsibility that they did not have insurance owing to their erroneous ideas. They could beg money from family or go to hell, but I was not going to give them anything. They were no longer entitled to anything from me, including my time and money. Update number 3. Hey, something pretty strange happened today, and I need to get it off my chest. I haven't been able to inform my friends about what has been going on, because most of the people I know have only known me for a short time. I don't think I want to share anything about my family history with these people, so Reddit is all I have. It's been about 2 weeks since I last spoke with my folks. Allison showed up at my apartment a few hours ago, around the evening. Her unexpected visit astonished me, first and foremost because I did not expect her to know where I lived. Apparently, one of our high school friends told her about the neighborhood where I lived, and she asked around to find out exactly where I was. That is a lot of effort for her to do simply to meet me, of all people. She looked and acted far differently than I remembered. She's gotten more polished and sophisticated, which is a significant change from the way she used to speak in high school. Now she sounds more ladylike and behaves better. Her fashion sense has evolved, as has her jewelry, and her makeup appears more sophisticated. It felt as if I wasn't even speaking to Allison. But one thing has not changed: who she is as a person. I guess you can't put cosmetics on your heart and instruct people to name it Mrs. Davis, as she did to herself. Her personality and ideas have undoubtedly not changed. She knocked on my door, and I let her in. I was startled to see her, but also interested as to why she had stopped by. I decided to hear her out. After some small conversation about her life, in which she unpromptedly told me everything she'd been up to and boasted about how wonderful her life was as a stay-at-home mom of 2 toddlers married to a wealthy man, I politely nodded through her presentation. She talked about how she had nothing to worry about but her cuticles and even began urging me to do the same, telling me how underappreciated being a traditional housewife was. I couldn't wait for her to stop chatting about extraneous topics and get to the issue. Finally, after roughly 15 minutes of talking about her life, she explained why she was here. Apparently, she had returned to see our parents since they had begged her to do so following the accident. They did not want her money. They simply wanted her to be there for them. After 2 weeks, she decided to return, and while she was here, she thought she'd pay me a visit so we could finally bury the hatchet. Thus far, so good. But then she began complaining. She claimed our parents were too needy and disrespectful of her new family. She went on and on about how she had to leave her 2 babies with their nanny merely to visit them. She stated she loathed our parents for forcing her to choose between them and her children. I can never understand why she keeps referring to them as her children when they are clearly not hers. They are her husband's children from his previous marriage. Even though I hadn't asked, she proceeded to tell me a lot about her marriage and spouse. According to what I gathered, Allison's husband most likely married her solely to boost his chances of obtaining at least partial custody of his children, which he accomplished. But she believed he loved her or something. He had been in a custody fight for a long time, and as a full-time businessman, he didn't have enough time for his children. His ex-wife was using this against him. Then he claimed that he was engaged and planned to marry as soon as the divorce was finalized, which tipped the scales in his favor. Allison told me all of this while gloating about how she saved those children. To me, it sounded like her husband had cheated her. They hadn't known each other for more than a year when he asked her to marry him, so it was obvious he wasn't in love with her. Nobody falls in love that easily, especially after a divorce. But Allison appeared blissfully unaware, or perhaps she knew he didn't love her but was ready to overlook it due to his large money balance. She seemed content being a glorified nanny to her husband's children. On top of that, she was upset with our parents for wanting her at their side after they had been in a tragic tragedy. She somehow believed that being there for them was detracting from her time with her new family, which comprised a husband who most likely did not love her and 2 children who were not biologically connected to her. These children appeared to be doing well with their nanny, just as they were with her. If ungrateful had a face, Allison would be it. I am not a fan of my parents, but when she mentioned how needy they were, I couldn't believe this was the lady they had repeatedly chosen over me. She eventually got to the point of her visit and informed me that she was departing in 2 days. She had promised Mom and Dad that she would remain for at least a month, but now she stated she was tired of hearing them talk about the tragedy and how it was the worst experience of their lives, for the 10th time. She stated she needed to return home soon. What is her solution? She asked me to reconcile with our parents and take her place. She did not want to feel terrible about leaving them when they needed her. She had no idea they had cut me off again because I refused to help with their bills, most likely because they don't talk about or think about me, so they didn't tell Allison. She came here for sympathy. She wanted me to feel sorry for her for having to deal with our parents and abandoning her family. She intended to use her pity to persuade me to step into her shoes and provide emotional support for our parents because she did not feel up to the role. It was typical Allison manipulation, but I'd known her techniques for too long to fall for them. I had no intention of telling her how I truly felt while she was in my home because it would undoubtedly lead to a fight. So I promised her I'd try, but I know I won't. She went after telling me to keep in touch, which we both knew she didn't mean. Honestly, I was relieved to see her leave. Not only is she a nasty and narcissistic person, but she is also really boring to talk to. I could barely say anything while she went on about her dull existence in California. Her life revolves primarily around parties, stepchildren, and her husband. She believes she is living a dream, but I found it depressing. Her husband clearly does not love her, and her children already spend half of their time with their mother. Of course, they'll grow up to prefer their biological mother over Allison, and they probably already do, based on what I've heard. But it's fine since she chose that life for herself. The life I chose for myself will be far away from my family, who are undeserving of even a quarter of my care or pity. If anything, today taught me that I was correct to distance myself from my parents and sister. I do not want to be a part of these people's lives. They're really selfish and vicious, and I doubt they're capable of thinking about anyone other than themselves, particularly Allison. I'm ashamed to be linked to such folks. At least now, I've been able to permanently cut links with all of them. It is unlikely that they will be able to contact me anytime soon. I blocked Allison as soon as she departed, and I've previously barred my parents and other relatives for a few days. I believe I am secure from being disturbed by my relatives in the near future. I'll pray that they don't try to contact me again after this, because I'm much better off without them. Pursued my dream as a photographer, lost my parents' support, until they learned about my six-figure income. My parents went completely crazy when I decided to try my hand at fashion photography instead of attending college after high school. For months, we quarreled over this. Ultimately, they informed me that they would never forgive me and would stop interacting with me if I chose to go down this route rather than earning a college degree. Knowing that my connection with my parents was not my top concern at the moment, I did not let that deter me. My goal was to become a fashion photographer, and I did just that. They were furious with me and avoided talking to me for a few years. I found it really challenging, particularly because I was so young and needed assistance from other family members. Most of the assistance I required was monetary. I had only ever worked summer jobs part-time before, and the money I had saved was insufficient to support myself in a new place. I was in dire need of help because, at the time, I was an intern and didn't get paid much. Fortunately, my dad's older sister, my aunt, frequently sent me the money I needed to pay my bills. Naturally, my aunt had a soft spot for me because I had always been close to her daughter as a child. Even with her help, I occasionally still felt very alone. After I left home, my brother and dad began to act as though I didn't even exist, so I didn't have the support of my immediate family. Because it would cause friction between them, my aunt never disclosed to my father that she was providing financial support for me. Without a doubt, he would blame her for pushing me to make poor choices. In spite of this, my aunt informed me of my parents' reactions to my decision. She would always bring me up to them when she saw them, but they would usually still react negatively. It was discouraging to hear them abruptly shift the subject. Then, one year, they suddenly demanded that I spend the holidays at home so that we could get back in touch. In the end, I returned that year to try again with our relationship. They were pretty normal about the whole thing, which surprised me because I had expected an emotional reunion. My mother later informed me that they knew I wouldn't alter my mind, so they made the decision to get in touch with me. Furthermore, they didn't want to be seen as the type of parents that didn't encourage their kids' goals and aspirations because that would come across negatively. I came to see that rather than truly respecting my choice, they had only contacted me to protect their brand. Despite my disappointment, I made the decision to keep in contact with them in the hopes that they would someday reconsider their opinion of me. They have never seemed to be as proud of me as they are of my brother, even though I have told them about all of my successes over the previous few years. After earning a business degree, my brother began working with a friend of my dad's. He makes a nice living, and my parents are always boasting about how he started providing for them as soon as he started working. I did offer to assist them monetarily, so it's not that I hadn't. But because of my unusual line of work, they turned me down, saying they wouldn't feel comfortable taking my money because they weren't sure I could live comfortably without it. I was aware that this was not a sincere worry. It served as just another reminder that they didn't think I was performing well enough and would much rather rely on my brother. I was never going to be good enough for them, no matter what I did. They relied on my brother instead of believing me, even after I assured them that I was okay and could help. It wasn't like they didn't require assistance. They have been having financial difficulties for the past few years, particularly following the pandemic. About 2 years ago, my parents had to close the cafe they owned and retire early because of significant losses sustained during the pandemic. My brother began providing them with financial help at that point. It was quite offensive that they refused to assist me in spite of this. I stopped insisting on staying in contact with them after that. The only times we would see each other were at family gatherings, where I would try to be as polite as possible. Since I knew they wouldn't value me, I even stopped spending the holidays at home. Rather, they would take advantage of the occasion to criticize and ridicule my decisions. I was done with that negativity. I no longer needed it in my life. Since then, our relationship has gotten much worse, and we hardly ever communicate. Because I dislike discussing it, very few family members are aware of my feelings. My cousin, who recently got engaged, is one of the few who does. My family was invited to her engagement party a few days ago, but I was also invited. Regretfully, my illness prevented me from attending. After years of not speaking to me, my parents finally called me while I was away because of a chat my cousin had with them. I need to explain what my cousin told me before I talk to my parents about the phone call. As soon as I finished talking to my parents, I contacted my cousin to talk to her about it. She informed me that my parents had been boasting at the engagement party about my brother's big promotion at work and how he would now be making nearly twice as much as he had before. My cousin claimed that it was starting to irritate her. I'm not sure if that's accurate or if they were exaggerating. In addition to making the entire celebration about themselves, they were utterly disregarding the fact that I, their other kid, was succeeding in her life on par with, if not better than her. She was aware that, despite my best efforts to pretend otherwise, my connection with my parents clearly had an impact on me. Even though I had accomplished a lot, I felt like I could never do enough to make them proud of me. I found that to be really distressing. My cousin chose to defend me since she was aware of this. My relative mentioned how wonderful it was that they now had 2 children earning 6 figures annually as my parents were boasting about my brother. My parents, who hadn't bothered to stay in contact with me over the previous 2 years, were understandably startled. Since I didn't think it was necessary, I had never disclosed my income to them. My parents called me the following day after my cousin dropped that bombshell without providing any further details. I was taken aback when they called. They inquired as to whether I had been making 6 figures annually and whether I had been doing so for a number of years. Thinking they were finally calling to congratulate me and express their pride, I made the decision to be honest with them. They said they couldn't believe they had been forcing my brother to provide for them financially when I had been doing so well, which was really foolish and delusional of me. They had the gall to become upset rather than happy for me. They chastised me for not informing them of my earnings sooner so they could make an informed decision about which child should provide them with financial support. I couldn't speak. In retrospect, that was exactly the reaction I should have anticipated, but it was not the one I had anticipated. Let me tell you what occurred next if you think that's awful. My parents began to explain how they had put a lot of pressure on my brother when I didn't reply. They said that he had been too busy providing for them to save enough money for his own future. They maintained that I should now pay $100,000 in reparations to help even things up because I hadn't been burdened in the same manner. They rationalized it by claiming that they were also my parents and that I had to share my brother's responsibility. They made it seem as though I had been avoiding accountability, utterly disregarding the fact that they had initially turned down my assistance. After giving their request some attention, I erupted in laughter and hung up. The scenario was so ridiculous that it was the only response I could summon. I then gave my cousin a call to get the whole narrative and to double-check the information. I have been deliberately avoiding my parents ever since. After the call, I banned their number, but they began texting me from a burner phone, which I also blocked. In every one of their mails, I was accused of concealing my earnings. They said they would never have requested my brother for help and would have accepted my help instead if they had known about it sooner. Recently, I also received a text from my brother, who usually avoids similar situations. He stated that he thought our parents had a point, but he didn't want to pick sides. He acknowledged that they ought to have been more encouraging and that they had mistreated me. But he also said that I should have told them exactly how much I made rather than leaving them in the dark if I really wanted them to accept my assistance when I first offered. He maintained that they couldn't have known I was doing so well for myself because this isn't a career they understood well. He said that he had been the only one providing for our parents up until this point and that he thought it only right that I do the same. I owe it to them because they reared me, he reminded me, and whether I like it or not, they are also my parents. I'm bewildered now. I'm sorry for my brother, but I'm not sorry for my parents. Although we haven't had a fantastic relationship, it hasn't been as horrible as our relationship with our parents. He could have a point though, and I can't deny that. Is it bad of me to keep my actual income a secret from my parents? Edit. Since people are curious as to why I never told my parents how much I made, here's the answer. First of all, I dislike discussing my income. I want people to trust me when I tell them that I have enough to aid them, especially my parents. Why would I pretend that I had the money to provide for them? Second, money isn't the only metric I use to gauge my achievement. For me, success is about following my dreams and realizing them, Not about how much money I make. When I first began out, I felt just as accomplished since I had followed my passion and defied the odds. In addition to being wealthy, I wanted my parents to be proud of me for being content and successful in my line of work. Finally, I never realized that in order to get their approval, I would have to be specific about my salary. I suppose I've had some delusions about them throughout my life. Eventually, I thought they would treat me the same way they treated my brother, but that never materialized. Before any of this occurred, I did discuss this with my cousin, who informed me that I shouldn't have needed to disclose my income to my parents in order for them to treat me like their child. At least someone was on my side, so it was a tremendous relief when she told me that I hadn't done anything wrong. Additionally, I am positive that my aunt shares my cousin's viewpoint. But what really irritates me is that my brother, who had previously been impartial, is suddenly opposing me. I'm open to any suggestions you may have because I haven't decided whether or not I should feel bad about it. First update. Hello, I appreciate all of your remarks. I suppose I needed that because going through them was a true eye-opener for me. Actually, I had started to think that perhaps I was mistaken, but I no longer believe that to be the case. I blocked my brother as well after realizing that, despite his initial neutrality, it had not aided me in any way. Unlike my aunt and cousin, who both defended me, he never did. In all honesty, my brother is only supporting my parents today because they have never given him a reason to oppose them, in contrast to me, who undoubtedly has a number of reasons. I responded to his message prior to blocking him. Although he didn't grow up in the same household as me, I informed him that I still respected the idea that he was making the extra effort to defend our parents. He can never really comprehend what I've gone through since the parents he knows are so different from the parents I know. His statement that I owe it to our parents to assist them, whether I like it or not, was incredibly unjust. I owe them nothing at all. Anything they did for me prior to my 18th birthday was required by law, not as a favor. I left home to pursue my aspirations as soon as I was no longer a minor. They didn't support me or even spoke to me for the next few years after that. My aunt, not my brother or my parents, had supported me during that period. My cousin provided me with emotional support the entire time. As a result, I seldom ever think of my brother or parents as family because they have never supported me. My aunt is the one person I owe the most. My brother has been providing for our parents alone for the past few years, and I don't blame him for that. It's not that I didn't offer assistance, in fact, I did, but they turned me down. I decided to cut them out of my life because of that. They also didn't appear to be in any worse shape without me. They haven't apologized to me, but now that they know how much I earn, they expect me to make it right. That's entitled and unfair, and I don't think I have to put up with it. I decided I didn't want to talk to my brother anymore after sending him that message, so I blocked him as well. Neither my brother nor my parents have messaged me since. My aunt, however, got in touch with me and informed me that my brother must have forwarded my message to my father. I had stated in the mail that my aunt had helped me out when my parents hadn't. My father went crazy over it, as we had anticipated, and started blaming my aunt for misguiding me. He thinks I wouldn't have deviated so much from my parents if my aunt had never encouraged me and had instead advised me to return to them and follow their rules. He maintains that we would have a far better connection now if it had occurred. To be honest, I have no idea why someone would think this. In all honesty, I would have found another means to follow my aspirations even if my aunt hadn't assisted me. I would not have abandoned them. I wouldn't be earning as much money or enjoying my career as much if I hadn't been able to pursue a career in photography. Rather, I would be angry at my parents for preventing me from pursuing my own interests. How would our relationship be enhanced by that? It would have significantly worsened the situation. My aunt is currently being used as a scapegoat, which seems to be all they need. They have been accusing her of being a bad sister in their constant messages. They say that instead of supporting me, she would have persuaded me to return to my parents if she had been a decent sister. My present bad behavior, which they say has always been praised, is attributed to her. They have even implicated my cousin in this, claiming that it is not surprising that she has become impolite and uncultured. They contend that because my cousin called them out at her engagement party, this illustrates my aunt's incapacity to raise children appropriately. My parents are essentially acting irrationally. My aunt is certain that they won't let this go, despite the fact that she has barred them. They are intent on making a big deal out of it and playing the victim in a predicament they started. I truly don't know what else I can say to my brother if he still believes that supporting our parents is appropriate in light of everything that has happened. I suppose I should have anticipated it. Perhaps this isn't unexpected because, although he never mistreated me, he also never defended me. Second update. Hello, I haven't posted anything for the past 2 weeks. My parents made the decision to make this drama public for some reason. They have posted a number of posts disparaging my aunt and myself in the last several days, and I honestly have no idea what they are trying to accomplish. They have been promoting a biased narrative in these posts. They say that despite the fact that photography is an unsteady career, my aunt pushed me to pursue it against their wishes. They also claim that I rejected their attempts to patch things up with me. They claim that when they recently requested financial assistance from me, I ostensibly offered but minimized my income. As a result, they had to rely on my brother, which has had an impact on his financial security. I'm still refusing to assist and placing all the weight on my brother, even though they're acting as though they just recently found out the whole truth about my financial status. A large portion of their story is false, and it is entirely biased. I don't want to interact with them on social media, and neither does my aunt. We've been attempting to get in touch with them privately to request that they remove the posts. I even warned them that if they didn't comply, I would get legal help. But, because no one is going to waste their money on a lawyer for something like this, I suppose my parents can see I'm bluffing. This is a minor nuisance, but it's not like it's having a significant impact on me. Many people, including those I haven't spoken to in years, have contacted me to inquire about the issue. The way they are handling this as a show bothers me a lot. I want my parents to remove their posts because I may have to share my side of the story with my aunt if they don't. Asking them to remove the posts hasn't worked at all thus far, but neither of us wants to do that. We might eventually have to publicly present our case. We should go ahead, according to my relative, but I'm sick of anticipating all the drama that will ensue. In any case, we must take the necessary action. Third update. My last post was 2 days ago, and as I previously stated, we were at a loss on what to do. In the end, my aunt and I posted the truth, not just our version of events. In order to dispel my parents' biased story, we wanted to correct the record. My parents haven't made any public remarks about it yet, but many people have left encouraging remarks. The rest of the family hasn't been as ignorant as I initially believed, it turns out. Many of them have observed throughout the years how my parents have been more publicly proud of my brother and have always treated him better than I have. Getting all of this support makes me very happy. At least I now know that, in my heart, they supported me, even though they had never previously spoken out about it. That is reassuring. But when my brother sent me an email, his reply wasn't encouraging. I was advised that what I was doing was seriously messed up. He claimed that he had been attempting to manage the problem with our parents and had nearly persuaded them to remove their posts. However, they are now refusing to do so because I posted my side. He claimed that I wasn't the kind of person who would add fuel to the fire and stir up more controversy. He's correct. I didn't want to make things worse, but I had no other option. My brother has treated me unfairly, in my opinion. This was started by our parents, not by me. I only spoke the truth to avoid needless hatred toward my aunt and me. It's possible that my parents should have considered the repercussions before making such a fuss. I don't think I have anything further to say to my brother at this time. It is obvious that he has chosen a side, and it is not mine. In any case, I had no desire to communicate with my parents. I don't mind at all if they all want to completely cut me out of their life. Fourth update. Hi everyone, my last update was quite a few months ago. I recently returned home to attend the wedding of my cousin. As her maid of honor, I performed all of my responsibilities for her for about a month before the wedding. She informed me that neither my brother nor my parents had received an invitation. They shouldn't have been surprised by this because it was obvious that neither my aunt nor my cousin wanted anything to do with them following the events of a few months earlier. I don't see why my parents thought they would be invited, when they hadn't even tried to apologize to any of us following the incident. They were not just disappointed that they hadn't received an invitation, but they had also expected one. They even came to shout at my aunt when she was at her residence. My father was incensed and informed her that she couldn't abandon him for such a little matter. Coming from a dad who essentially pulled his daughter out of his life, that is rather ironic. My aunt quickly put him in his place after putting up with his antics. After a heated argument that day, my parents are now ranting about us to anyone who would listen. I don't think anyone is taking them seriously, though, as it looks like the most of them are just looking to gossip. My brother has not gotten back to me. Although it is unfortunate, he has made the decision to support our parents. Everything went off without a hitch, and the wedding was stunning. The icing on the cake was that I also got to spend a lot of time with my aunt and cousin. I've returned to work after a much-needed vacation. Knowing that my parents haven't altered at all in all these months is comforting. Am I the asshole for calling my friend a creepy weirdo after she posted a TikTok about my husband? Original post, I, 28F, am friends with this girl, Let's call her June, also 28F. In fact, my husband, 32M, and I often hang out with June and her boyfriend, i.e. go on double dates, have weekend trips, etc. We've known each other for over 2 years. I would say that we four were pretty tight as a group, up until this weekend. My husband is an orthodontist. One of his patients is June's half-sister, Rhea, 12F. June often is the one accompanying Rhea to her dental appointments. June is also a small time for online influencers. She's always recording and vlogging and stuff. Though my husband and I have made it clear to her that we're absolutely not okay with our faces in her vlogs online, and she seemed to respect that boundary. We don't use social media, apart from Reddit. And we trusted her word when she said she's not gonna post us online. Cut to last weekend, my brother sent me this TikTok link with the message, "Dude, you gotta watch this." I opened the link and it directed me to June's TikTok account. She doesn't have much followers, less than 10K, but the particular video he sent me had like 500,000 views or likes, I'm not sure which. Lo and behold, it was a video compilation of my husband with the title, "God, I see what you've done for others." The video was honestly the creepiest thing I've ever seen. She had recorded my husband during various of our double dates together, and it was clear he wasn't even aware he's being recorded. In some of the clips, she would start with her face and then pan the camera towards my husband with a cutesy expression and mouthing words like, "Oh my God." The worst one was where he was working on her half-sister, Rhea, wearing scrubs, and she'd recorded even that. She didn't even bother to blur out the kid's face while she was lying on the dental chair. I showed the video to my husband and he was horrified. He said it made him so uncomfortable and violated knowing that someone had been secretly recording him. He was angry that she'd recorded him working on a patient. He texted her asking to take down the video and delete every video she has of him. First she feigned ignorance, then she said that she meant no harm and that it was all for online engagement, since, I quote, "TikTok with hot guys go viral very fast," and that she'd gained a lot of followers after posting that. This was all so weird, but my husband and I got our families and friends to report the video, and thankfully it's being taken down now. This pissed off June and she sent me a long-ass text saying how I was jealous of her online success and that I couldn't stand seeing her succeed, blah blah blah. I replied saying, "You're delusional and unhinged. You're not successful and you'll never be. Stay away from us, you creepy weirdo." Now she's all weepy and depressed and has been telling our common friends how mean I was to her. She's also been posting about mental health on her socials and about how mean some women are with their words, lol. AITA. AITA has no consensus bot. OOP was NTA relevant comments commenter. NTA. You and your husband had set clear boundaries and she violated those boundaries. This shows that she doesn't respect you at all. I recommend cutting her off entirely, as anyone who disturbs your peace is not worth your time. OOP. Yes. We're cutting her off entirely. I don't know if her boyfriend is aware of this or not, but I guess he'll have to be collateral damage cause I don't want her to weasel her way back into our lives. Commenter 2, NTA. People who think online engagement is more important than basic human decency are sadly not at all uncommon, and they are, as you say, delusional and unhinged. Their success is not real, and except in a very few cases, it never will be. OP, it's psychotic honestly. My husband is so freaked out about this. I feel so bad for him. Commenter 3. He might need to drop the half-sister as a patient and/or tell the parents that she, June, is not allowed to accompany her anymore. I agree that is a creepy weirdo. If she can't get followers or likes without lying and getting consent for people to be recorded, then she needs to find a new career. OOP, yes, he's in the process of informing her parents. I don't think he's gonna drop her as a patient as her treatment is almost done and it's gonna be a hassle for her to find a new orthodontist. Commenter 4. He needs to ban her sister, your former friend, RL, from the room while he is treating the patient. He needs to have a female staff member assist him and act as chaperone should your friend try to make baseless accusations. OOP, there's a rule in his practice that a female dental assistant has to present whenever they, the male doctors, are working on female patients, as most of the patients are young kids, teens, and they might be more comfortable with a woman around. Even in the video she posted, there is a woman assisting my husband. He's reached out to the kids' parents. They're being given two choices. Either they chaperone their daughter or they need to find a different orthodontist. I really hope it doesn't come to baseless accusations though. Update. I don't want to make another post for the same thing and I doubt I'm going to be updating again. My husband's practice reached out to Rhea's parents and informed them about the situation via an email, as they wanted everything documented, like I mentioned in the comments. The parents have responded. They are shocked and very, very apologetic. They have agreed to chaperone Rhea on her appointments instead of June. They wanted to meet my husband personally to apologize, but he informed them that that won't be necessary. June's TikTok video is still in the process of being taken down. No new updates on that. I guess she contested the reports or something. I'm not entirely sure. My husband and I have blocked her. My brother is keeping an eye on her account though, just in case she posts something else about us. We'll see what to do when it happens. We're gonna be consulting a lawyer if she bothers us again in the future. My husband is kinda shaken up / upset / annoyed about this whole thing. He's taken some days off from work and so have I. We'll plan a trip somewhere maybe, to take his mind off of these things. Right now I need to be there for him. I won't be posting anything for now. We haven't contacted her boyfriend yet. My husband is not in the right headspace right now and I feel it'll be better if we focus on ourselves for the time being. We don't want the added headache of how the boyfriend will react if he's in on this or whatever. We'll inform him after some time. I know this is selfish, but I think it's for the best. Thank you all for the responses. New update. We thought the drama was done, but nope. We filled June's boyfriend in on everything, and he was shocked, hurt, and confused. Turns out, June managed his social media, and he had no clue what she was posting. He thanked us, and we thought that was it. But then he asked to meet up, saying he needed to discuss something. To be honest, we were extremely hesitant to meet with him. We were so done with the drama and didn't want to get sucked back in. But, he seemed genuinely concerned and willing to listen. So we agreed. At the meeting, he revealed he'd confronted June. She broke down, professed her love, and claimed her obsession with my husband was for social media clout. Apparently, his total package made for great content. When he asked to see her phone she refused. So he checked her laptop, and found hundreds of sneaky photos and videos of my husband. And for laughs, she had pics of me looking my absolute worst, mouth open while eating, weird faces, the works. I think I'm pretty good looking, but these photos were the opposite. It's like she wanted to prove a point about my husband's ugly wife. June's boyfriend dumped her. But, honestly, we're even more freaked out now. The scale of her obsession is terrifying. Hundreds of photos and videos. That's not just a crush, that's fixation. The thought of her escalating to something more is keeping us up at night. As a small consolation, June's boyfriend made her delete the videos from her social media and laptop. But God knows how many more copies she has. Despite June not reaching out after all this went down, we're still on high alert. Her radio silence is kinda unnerving, and we're bracing ourselves for whatever might come next. Hopefully it is in fact just for social media clout, not some weird baby reindeer type obsession with my husband. It's kinda unsettling how she was friends with me for over 2 years. We hung out often. We've gone on weekend trips with her and her boyfriend. We have so many mutual friends and yet no one knew she's doing this behind our backs. Either I'm bad at reading people or she's very good at being sneaky and deceptive. I'm also mentally kicking myself for not realizing that someone was taking pictures of me. I feel my husband and I both need to be less dumb and more aware of our surroundings lol. On a brighter note, Raya's parents are super thankful to my husband for still treating Raya after everything. That's it for now. Hopefully, this is really the end. Relevant comments. Commenter 1, just be careful OP. Jane sounds unhinged. Oh OP. We are. It's kinda scary though because she knows where we live / where we usually hang out / where I work / where my husband works. Commenter 2, man this is some serious soap opera level drama like you said though. Better to stay aware. No one likes being caught off guard. Hopefully it ends soon and you can move on. At least the parenting situation seems good. OP, Raya's parents are wonderful. They were the ones who used to initially accompany Raya to her appointments. They said June told them that she wants to spend more time with Raya and she's otherwise busy so she could be the one chaperoning her. They had agreed because Raya was excited about spending time with her sister. It's really shitty that June was using Raya as a ruse to get near my husband NGL. Commenter 3. Wow, just wow. I would take all the evidence and a statement from the ex to a lawyer and get some type of restraining order requiring her to stay away and remove all social media of you two. She seems unhinged and needs to stay away. This makes me think of a stalker movie and you guys need to change stuff before the movie has a bad ending. OOP, we're gonna be talking to a lawyer to see what options we have. Our apartment has 24-hour security so I doubt she can do anything there. I'm more worried about our workplaces tbh. New update. I really didn't want to update this situation, but things have taken a seriously dark turn. When I posted about June's thing for my husband a month ago, I thought it was just some weird crush. Now, it's flat out terrifying. The day after my last post, my husband got a super creepy message from a random number. You have got it all wrong, Please meet me, I'll make you understand. We freaked. Lawyers and cops are on it, trying to get a restraining order. Both our workplaces have ramped up security, and we've warned friends and family to keep an eye out. This whole thing is destroying my husband's mental health. He's anxious 24/7, wondering if he's being followed. He's stopped going to work because the feeling of being watched is overwhelming. We're trying to prioritize his safety. And honestly, it's breaking my heart. The other night, he broke down in tears. I've never seen him cry before. It was shattering. He's been talking to a therapist online, trying to cope with the stress and anxiety. But even that's not easing his mind. He's consumed by fear for my safety, constantly worrying that June will harm me to get to him. We're covering our bases, security cams, dash cams, the whole works. And I've scoured our home twice for any hidden devices, thank God, all clear. If things get worse, we're prepared to get up and move. Honestly, it's better to have a life in a different state than to be dead here. It's heartbreaking to think about leaving our friends, family, and everything behind, but we'll do what it takes to stay safe. Some of the advice on here was really helpful, and I've done most of what was suggested. If someone, anyone, has any more insights, please share. I'm desperate at this point, TBH. After my pregnant Sil ignored my son's severe allergy and brought peanut-based snacks into our home, I threw them out. Am I the asshole? Hello, this is a throwaway account and a repost and update of sorts because my post got taken down from the other Am I the Asshole sub. My brother and his wife Laura, who is 7 months pregnant, are staying with us for a week or so since he's interviewing for jobs in the city my family and I are in. My kids love having their aunt and uncle around and everything's been great. Yesterday, Laura went out and came back with groceries. I thanked her but told her that we don't expect them to do this, the kitchen is stocked and that we're just enjoying having them. She said that she wanted to and that most were cravings she's been having. I started helping her unload the bags and noticed that a lot of snacks were with peanuts, cookies, crackers, PB, even some sort of cake fusion. It all made me uneasy because she knows my oldest son, 8M, is extremely allergic. I don't keep anything of the kind in our home because we've had an incident when he was younger, where we almost lost him. I didn't want to be rude but I told her that I'm not comfortable with having the stuff in the house. She told me that she would be careful, that she wouldn't eat it around him or his siblings and that she'd clean up after herself, that she was having intense cravings and needed them. Look, I've had 4 kids and kind of get where she's coming from, although I never had to have something, but every woman is different. I made sure my son knew not to touch any of it and to leave her alone when she's eating them. That was that. Today, I woke up early to make breakfast and open the fridge only to be greeted by strawberries dipped in PB left out without a container to chill. The PB jar wasn't sealed properly next to them and there were sandwiches on a plate because she likes the bread cold and soggy. I was pissed. I've read enough about airborne contamination to know that you can't really determine it, but I wasn't risking it. I grabbed a bag and started throwing everything in it, our groceries, hers, I didn't care. I was going to take the bag, drive to a shelter and let them know the situation. Laura woke up while I was on my rampage, came down and asked all upset what I was doing. I was snippy with her and didn't try to hide it. We got in an argument with her defensively saying that I can't do this, that the baby needs it and that it's cruel to put a pregnant woman through unsatisfied cravings. I told her bluntly that I don't give a single fuck, if she can't keep to her word then I won't either and that she'll live without her craving. My son can't say the same with his allergy. She went back upstairs, packed her bag and came back down, grabbed the bag of food and left in a huff. My brother was at his interview and called me half an hour later to ask me what happened. He was upset with his wife but also with me because nothing happened and at the end of the day, my son is fine. I told my husband when he came back from work and he's completely on my side. AITA, mini update. Like some people had predicted in the comments on the other sub, Laura did go straight to my family and started complaining. She hadn't twisted anything, told them the full honest story and my mother was livid. She called me panting like she ran a marathon after she berated Laura to make sure my son is okay, so I can only imagine the riot act she read to her. Apparently, even my stepdad gave Laura one of his disapproving frowns. My brother came back in the evening to get his stuff since Laura had only packed hers for some reason. He apologized for what she did and said that he'll have a chat with her once she's calmed down. She's been inconsolable. He told me that she's been crying since she left my mom's house and that she now feels unwelcome and unloved in our family and he blames me for it. My husband butted in and told him that it's enough. That whatever she's feeling doesn't cover half of what we felt and that she needs to get over herself. That I've been scrubbing the house from top to bottom for hours because of her actions. I did get panicky and went on to deep clean the whole house, especially the kitchen, but anyway, my brother left after he said that there's no leveling with us when we're being this stubborn. Now that I've had time to get out of the state I was in, I do feel bad that she's distressed and feels unwelcome in our family. That was never my goal. I've been debating sending her an apology. Not for my actions because I stand by them, but for the way I went about it. I shouldn't have allowed the stuff in our house in the first place and could have been calmer about it after I opened the fridge. Update. A lot of people asked me to update, so here it is. Warning. This is a long one, and if I wasn't an before, I sure am now. So after my mom berated Laura and my brother yelled at my husband and I took the advice I was given and sent them a long text which ended up being a bit of a ramble about everything. How fucked the situation is. How we're disgusted by their stance and how we'll be going LC until we feel ready to be around them again. That was the day after my brother packed his bags and left. I was left to read and I thought that was that until a few days ago when I got a call from Laura. I thought about not answering it, but curiosity got the better of me. When I picked up, Laura tried to make awkward small talk, but I think she sensed I wasn't in the mood and got right to it. She apologized about her behavior, said she had no excuse other than her hormones, and we ended up having a long chat about everything. By the end of it, I actually felt better and like we could get past it and work on our relationship. She also mentioned that she would still like for my family and I to come to her birthday dinner. It wasn't going to happen in a restaurant anymore. I guess the hotel stay ended up costing them a lot, as some of you predicted, and that it was going to be at their house instead. I told her that I'll talk with my husband and get back to her. I also got a text from my brother apologizing and saying he was just trying to protect and stand by his wife. It was too soon to start mending things, as my husband pointed out, but he left the choice up to me, and I honestly believed her apology because she had never acted like that before and she seemed actually ashamed of herself. Anyway, my sister, who was also apologized to BC, she also tore her a new one. And parents, also got an apology. We're also invited, but my sister's kids wanted a cousin sleepover instead of going with us, so after talking it over with my sister, we agreed for them to have one at my house. My babysitters for a year are my next door neighbors. They're sweet and responsible 16-year twins who live with their single mom. They usually team up and tackle my kids on date nights. There's a reason I'm mentioning this. With my sister's added 2 kids to the mix, I asked their mom if she was free to join their duo and she agreed. So I called Laura and told her that Richard and I are coming. When we got to their house, Laura greeted my husband and I at the door. We handed her the gift and went in, but she seemed puzzled that we didn't have a trail of kids with us, so I reminded her that it's just us adults tonight. Same thing happened when my sister and her husband walked in. Dinner was awkward. No matter how we tried to lighten up the mood, and the conversation was stilted at best, but I thought it was at least a step forward. Laura asked this time about why the kids were not with us, that she had made special food for them. I never mentioned the kids when I got back to her, just my husband and I, but I felt like it was my fault that I didn't clarify, and so I apologized for it and thanked her for thinking of them. My sister chimed in that her kids and mine were having a cousin sleepover tonight and how she was excited about our soon-to-be nephew to join them when he's here and older. Laura looked at her with a smile and said, "Yeah, I'm sure he'll be best friends with his cousins, as in my kids, and his step-cousins, as in my sisters." This pissed me off because we don't step anything with the kids, but I bit my tongue. For context, my sister is technically my stepsister. I know I use stepdad in my first post. I usually call him by his first name. I consider him a parental figure since he raised me since I was 10, but I had a dad and the title will always be his. My sister gave her a hurt look, but it was my brother who nudged his wife with a, "What are you doing?" look. A few minutes went by again with eating and light convo before Laura asked again about our kids, mainly who was watching them since all 4 parents are here. I told her that my neighbor and her daughters are babysitting, to which she laughed at and joked about how incompetent the girls and their mom must be to need all 3 of them to wrangle the kids. Also, for context, I have 4 kids. I'm biased and like to think they're well behaved, but they're sometimes too much for one person to handle. Even me, and I'm the one that brought them into this world. Add my sister's 2 kids and it's a lot for 2 teenage girls to handle even for just a few hours. We left at 7, it said we'll be back at 11. It has absolutely nothing to do with the girls whom my kids adore or their mom who is as kind as they come. Before I could retort anything, my mom stepped in with one of her smiles and told Laura that it's so kind of her to offer her own competence and watch the kids next time. That shut her up real fast. After that, dinner was even more awkward until we cleared the table and Laura brought out dessert while my brother got the cake from the fridge. Here's where I lost the last of my remaining brain cells. I went to the bathroom and when I came out, I saw my husband carrying my bag and trying to usher me out of the front door to leave. He looked pissed and I was beyond confused, and obviously resisted because yes, the dinner is a train wreck, but let me at least say goodbye and give a lame excuse for our departure. When my husband tried to literally carry me out, I knew something was wrong, and after a couple of tries, I darted past him back to the dining room. Laura's now ready dessert table consisted of PB cake pops, PB pie, PB cookies, PB brownies, and top it all off, a PB birthday cake that my brother brought in and was sniffing at with a horrified look. Laura then gave me a big smile and said loudly to my family, "I thought I should at least get to have my cravings on my birthday. Get your fill before she throws these out too." I honestly thought for a second that my sister was going to tackle her, and I wasn't that far behind her because all I could think about was the fact that she thought my kids were coming and she planned this accordingly. I felt so guilty for allowing the stuff in our house the last time, and if my sister's kids hadn't wanted the sleepover, I was going to walk my son into danger a second time. I lost my shit. Without thinking about my actions, I grabbed Laura's head, forced her to talk towards my brother, who I think was too shocked to react, and slammed her head straight into the cake. I held it down as long as I could while she flailed and told her I hope she chokes on her cravings before I let her go. I honestly wanted to go for the pie too, but I had embarrassed myself enough by acting like that in the first place, so I told my brother that I'm done with both him and his wife, and if they try to contact me or my family again, I'm filing for a protective order. Then I let my husband lead me out. My sister was cackling as she followed us with her husband, but our parents stayed back. I heard Laura screaming profanities after us, but my stepdad raised his voice, which shut her up. I got a lot of jokes about his frown on my first post, but the man is as stoic as they come. Him showing any emotion is a big deal. I remember that his frown alone growing up was enough to literally stop my sister and I in our tracks, because we knew if he gave us one that we messed up. I haven't asked my mom what happened after we left because I can't handle any more heartache from my brother or his actions. I don't think this was the update anyone wanted, least of all me, but I'm completely done with both of them. Even though my brother looked like he had no idea, the stuff was in his house, happening under his damn roof. I'm sad I won't be in my nephew's life and my kids won't get to know the new cousin they've been waiting for, but I'd rather cry over that than over my son's life. I don't expect anyone to be kind in the comments. I'm 32, I shouldn't have been so naive, and I know I shouldn't have reacted like that, and I'm going to be dealing with that with my therapist along with the guilt I'm feeling, but please take it easy on me, I'm still shaken up. I'm also looking into family therapy for my kids so they can better process not having their uncle and aunt around after them having been a close presence in their lives. After my sister got pregnant, she expected me to house her and her boyfriend. Now she's living in his car. Am I the asshole for refusing to help? Original post: my family and I grew up very poor. From when I was old enough to legally work, I, 19F, have had to take on multiple jobs while balancing school to help with my family and my younger sister. Growing up, I never had a lot, and whatever money I earned I would spend on my sister, 16F, and family. When I was 18 and had just been accepted into college, my dad's business that he'd worked on for the past couple of years finally took off. This also meant that my sister could now have a normal high school experience without worrying about money. While I was in college, I wasn't in contact with my sister that much since I was so busy with schoolwork. However, from our calls and her social media, I could tell she had changed completely and was involved with some bad people. She would post videos on her Snapchat of her getting drunk, smoking weed, juuling, driving while most likely drunk, high, etc. I tried reaching out to her, but she would mostly deny the claims and told me to mind my own business. At some point, she justified her actions using the argument, "This is what the cool kids do now. Not everyone was a nerd like you in high school." One of my high school friends who also has a brother in the same grade reached out to me and said that she heard that my sister was seeing a sketchy guy from another school. Apparently he sells drugs and was expelled from my sister's high school. I asked my sister about this and she denied it. Last week I got a phone call from my mom who was sobbing. She tells me that my sister is pregnant. I was so shocked that I could not speak. Then I was angry. When I was her age and even younger, I gave her everything, and so did my parents, so she could have all the opportunities her peers had. Since my dad's business became lucrative, they've given her every opportunity to succeed, any extracurricular sport she wants, academic tutoring, school activities, etc. I never got any of those things. It angered me so much that she took all of this for granted and fucked up her life. The father. Her delinquent boyfriend who got expelled and sells drugs. She blows up my phone but I don't respond. She then sends me a series of long text messages asking if she can crash at my place. She also asked me if I could make her an appointment to see a doctor. Lastly, she asked if it would be okay if her boyfriend comes and stays over sometimes. I shut her down. I told her that you dug this hole for yourself. If you allow yourself to become pregnant, then you should be able to deal with the consequences. Also, I'm currently sharing a small apartment with 2 roommates. She begged some more and I denied her. In the past few days, She's been texting me and calling me non-stop saying that she has nowhere to go and has been living in her boyfriend's car. I haven't responded to a single message of hers, but I feel my resolve wavering a bit. I fully don't support her, but maybe I'm being an asshole. Edit. To clarify, I would still never house her in my apartment. That would be extremely disrespectful towards my roommates and would get me kicked out due to the lease agreement. I meant I was considering giving in and sending her some money. Edit 2. My parents have disowned her, not kicked her out. They are refusing to acknowledge that she is their daughter, but she is still welcome to live in their house. She chose not to since my parents are absolutely fuming and probably will yell at her and criticize her, which she honestly needs. Relevant comments. John C.E. I have a feeling if you gave in, you'd just be taken advantage of by your sister and her deadbeat BF. NTA, if she is old enough to be a mommy, she needs to learn to care for herself and grow up. You also have to consider your roommates. I'm sure they'd love to have 2 more, and eventually 3, people living there. OOP absolutely. I would never put this on my roommates. To clarify, I meant my resolve was wavering and that I might end up sending her some money, not offering to house her. That's still an absolute fucking no. Marlon Fishy NTA, she still has an option for a roof over her head and she chooses to stick it out with her loser boyfriend in his car. But your parents should not disown their daughter for this, it will only push her closer to her loser boyfriend. You should also be there for her as emotional support. Don't let her stay with you if you get in trouble with roommate/landlord, but let her know it will be okay. She made a mistake as an example and someone she can lean on. OOP yes, absolutely. I've sent her a ton of advice including links, forums, and general information. She has chosen to ignore that advice and instead continue to ask me to live at my place. Not sure what I'll do, but I don't think I'm going to get more involved than that. Like you said, she has somewhere to go back to. She's just choosing not to because she can't take the criticism. Update post 2. It's been a little bit more than 2 weeks since my first post, and I guess it's safe to say now that the situation has been resolved in probably the best way possible. In my last post, I stated that my sister was still living in the car of her delinquent boyfriend who sells drugs and refusing to come home because my parents had disowned her. At this point, I would like to clarify that my family and I are Chinese and it is common in Chinese culture to disown your kids when they do something that largely disappoints or embarrasses you. However, this is not a permanent disownment like many of you have brought up. As long as my sister apologizes sincerely and they can see that she is actively trying to fix her mistake and become better, they will take her back as their daughter. Another clarification would be for those people who assume that my dad kept us poor since he was stubborn and wanted to work on his business and not get a real job. His business was a passion project on the side. My dad was working 50 hours a week at 2 jobs. Alrighty, on to what ultimately happened with my sister. Despite the chain of advice I sent her, she ignored me still. I regularly checked in with her over the next week to see how she was and she gave me one-word replies until they ultimately stopped. I was growing concerned after she didn't pick up her cell, but then I received a call from my parents. According to my mom, my sister had returned home crying and begging for forgiveness. She had a serious talk with my parents where she apologized for her behavior and promised to make amends. My mom was very tearful as well. They scheduled a doctor's appointment for her immediately and I believe she went in the next day. I had no idea what made her finally break and return home, so I texted her. First, I told her I was proud of her for taking action and being mature, and asked if anything happened between her and her boyfriend. At first she was pretty stubborn and kept insisting that she was just over living in a car. But after a while she finally admitted that her boyfriend had requested that she start selling for him if she wanted to keep living in his car and eating his food that he was sneaking her. LMAO. What a fucking asshole. Glad my sister finally returned to her senses. She told me she broke it off with him and I sincerely hope that's the truth. This past Monday, she got the pills to successfully terminate her pregnancy. According to my mom, she was begging that they do it ASAP, which was really a breath of relief for all of us because we were worried she might want to keep it. The future seems pretty bright right now for her. My parents decided to pull her out of the public school and send her to a progressive private school that some of my close friends also went to. It's a fantastic school and I think it'd be great for her. She's officially starting next Monday. I'm going to visit her and my family this weekend and see how she's doing. Edit. Forgot to add that the new school also has a wonderful counseling department. I urged my parents to speak to the head psychologist there and they did, and she will be having mandatory weekly meetings with her and another therapist at the school. I suspect that my pregnant wife may have had an affair with her coworker. Am I the asshole for asking for a paternity test now? Original post May 9, 2024. My wife, 38F, and I, 39M, have been together for 12 years. I don't know how to describe it other than calling it the perfect relationship. I think in 12 years we've only ever gotten to the point of really raising our voices at one another maybe 2 or 3 times. We do everything together, but always have never had issues allowing each other to lead our own lives and follow our own interests. We bought a house where we wanted. We both have good high-paying jobs that have great work-life balance. Basically, it's been everything short of perfect. We've been trying for 2 years to get pregnant and it hasn't been happening. We were just about to start the fertility stuff when I came home from a work trip and guess what, she's pregnant. I had this weird instant thought of, wait, I thought we didn't try during the week last month because of the fertility testing. But I couldn't remember exactly because, to be honest, we were busy at it. So I just assumed I missed remembering. Now, I travel around the country pretty regularly for work. Other than COVID, I've been on the road as much as 40 weeks a year sometimes. Since COVID it's been less but still more than a week a month. Over the last 4-5 years my wife has gotten very friendly with a guy she works with, let's call him Matt. Matt is slightly younger, I think 34M or so. I know him, he's married, I know his wife. They've worked together for I think 7 years or so. He's always been around, he and I've been friendly. Have I ever thought something was happening? No, but I've always thought. You'd be a fool to not think there's even a 1% chance your spouse would go outside the relationship. Maybe I'm naive, but I've always seen it as a safeguard to not take my wife or any other partner in the past for granted. She's never given me a reason to think she'd do that. But anything is possible. So about a month ago I'm out of state for work and she's at home. I ask her what she's doing earlier in the day and she says Matt is coming by for dinner. Not out of the ordinary, Matt comes by from time to time. Sometimes with his wife, sometimes without, sometimes when I'm not there. I don't think much of it. We have a security system which includes cameras both inside and outside of the house which we installed after an unrelated incident a few years ago. They record and are live accessible by both her and I. I often use those cameras to check on the dog when I or both of us are away, as the rest of the system is monitored by a company in case of an alarm going off. She knows I check those cameras. There's a system installed where I can talk through them. I'll mess with my wife and she will be with me if either of us are out of town. She travels for work as well, but far less than I do. Point is, it's known that I check them often when I'm not at home. So I turn on the camera and I see my 4 months pregnant wife, lying on the floor, on her side with Matt sitting, straddling her legs and using a foam roller to massage her hips. So I'm like, okay, what the fuck is this? I start rewinding through the footage and they are eating and talking normally, but then they get on the couch and get under the same blanket. Now, they are feet to feet, but that couch isn't that big. Then they move to the floor and that's when I logged in. Anyway, I text her, I'm still watching the cameras, they both look like deer in headlights and he very quickly leaves. We get into an argument. She isn't mad at me accusing her but she's adamant that nothing has or ever would happen, and that what I saw was innocent and she was complaining about being in pain from the pregnancy. Which I know is true, she's already having some issues with back pain, etc. The biggest point of that discussion was I asked, if I were there would you two have been comfortable doing any of that in front of me? And she reluctantly admitted, no, probably not. I told her I didn't want to talk after that and we'd talk when I got home 3 days later. That's when it hit me. What if my weird gut moment feeling about her telling me she was finally pregnant was this? What if my 1% happened and this is not my child we are having? Now, it eats away at me while I'm at a hotel alone 1,000 miles away for 3 days. I reconcile with myself that, I think it's less likely than more likely that something between them has happened. But basically my 1% just jumped to 10%, 20% maybe. I get home and she's on eggshells and doesn't mention it. I kinda wait to see what she's going to do. 2 days later, she finally brings it up and breaks down. Swears nothing has happened. She would never. Doesn't do anything over the top to try and prove anything. Which I took as a good sign. But anyway, we talk out the issue and everything to a point of at least moving forward for now. I'm still coping and dealing with it, figuring out how to retrust after all this time. I'm getting more and more understanding of the fact that they are friends. They've been friends for so long, maybe he has intentions. But I don't see her having any and I've never really picked up on it and I've spent time around both of them together many times, and never caught anything. So the thing that is destroying me right now is, if I'm wrong and something did happen, while I can figure out how to deal with that. What if that child isn't mine? In the argument and a few long conversations we've had about the situation since I've never brought that up, and she's not mentioned it. Mostly because I don't want to make the situation worse and crush her if in fact she's telling the truth. which I mostly believe. The only thing I can think to do at this point is to wait until the baby is born and immediately order a paternity test in secret. Should I do that? Should I tell her and have it dealt with now? If you're a woman in her shoes and you're telling the truth, would that destroy you, or your view of me? If you're lying, what would you do if I asked? I don't want to ask a super vague question, but what should I do? TLDR, very small chance my wife of 12 years had an affair and she's 4 months pregnant and I can't bring myself to ask for a paternity test for fear of crushing her if nothing actually happened. But I am planning on doing it in secret when the baby comes. What should I do? Update. So many comments. Thank you everyone, more than I can address directly, but I'm going to keep reading a few things. 1. Stop DMing me about this, thanks. 2. Some have made some good points about addressing it now rather than later, and that's something that I'm considering more than I was before. Thank you. 3. To those focused only on my relationship. I get it, but that's not what I'm focused on. We've been talking about it a lot. My wife and I are pretty open people with each other. I'm not saying I'm convinced nothing happened, but I'm more focused on paternity right now. 4. If I need to track, spy on, life 360, my wife, then this relationship is over already. That's not the relationship we have and not one that I ever want, and in my opinion not one anyone should ever have. We are working on rebuilding trust. As I said in this long-winded post, my default of 1% possibility went up to 10% or so. Trust me, I'm taking my relationship seriously, but to those I've said this to already. If the kid isn't mine, then there's no longer any conversation to have. 5. I've already had this discussion with my lawyer. I don't live in a state where the birth certificate stuff will be an issue. If I have paperwork that this child isn't mine, then divorce isn't going to be much of an issue. Both of us are in an independent financial situation where it won't matter much regardless. I'll keep up with this post as long as I can and post an update when and if anything gets resolved. Update May 10, 2024. So she was out of state on a business trip until late last night. It's Friday, so she worked from home in our kitchen. So I asked to talk and brought it up and asked for a test. She immediately said yes and said there's zero doubt and nothing that she'd even have a second to worry about. But she has no problem doing it now. The only caveat I left it with is, if it's invasive at all per our doctors, then I'm okay waiting until it's low risk. I'm not a doctor, no clue what they'd have to do it now. So not sure when we are. But she's aware and we are getting one. It was a decent and longer conversation. We are currently sitting together getting lunch. She's got no clue I did this on Reddit. Hence the new account, because she is on here somewhere. Thank you everyone for your help and opinions. A bunch of you made me realize that we're already really open about everything, and if nothing happened then she wouldn't worry about getting one. I was more worried about her health and adding some insane level of stress if it was an issue, as she's an at-risk pregnancy and it took so long for us to get pregnant. So again, thank you all for the help. I suppose I can update if it's mine or not, but I'm not sure how long that will be. I'm 90 to 95% sure it is mine. But this will help us continue this conversation. Thank you. Update. Just because it seems to be more of a topic on this post versus the other one for some reason. Yes, I have the footage. No, I haven't talked to Matt yet. He's told her he wants to talk about it, but I've told them to wait on that. My relationship with my wife and paternity is what's important right now. I will eventually talk with Matt. No, I'm not going to get Matt's wife involved intentionally. I don't know why I would want to just be vindictive. I'm not going to cover for him obviously, but his relationship is his. And mine is mine. I'm not interested in making this worse. Whatever is going on between him and his wife isn't any of my business. Relevant comments. Upu, when asked why his wife thought she could be intimate with someone else. We've talked about it at length, nothing is being ignored. I could write you an essay about our past, her reasons and my feelings on it. But instead I'll just say, I'm aware of it. She's claiming innocence of anything further, but at the same time admitting that it wasn't a good look, but she wasn't thinking about it at the time. And that's what we are currently working through. When told it doesn't look innocent and asked if his wife goes to Matt's house when his wife isn't home, she's 4 months old. I was home. And we had been on the clock. To the point of the days blending together, trust me. We are pretty open people and pretty comfortable with ourselves and each other. I don't know if she's been to his house without his wife. I mean, the 3 and 4 of us all hang out probably once or twice a month, but they work directly together every day and have for years. So obviously there's a closeness there. They are both upper management in their company, and at my company I have long-term friends that are women. I've traveled with them. We've done dinner and hung out in hotel rooms together. But I've never done anything because that's not me. I'm married and love my wife and my life. I have no reason to. So I mean the optics are bad. I just have to decide if it's only the optics. Or if she has a reason too. Maybe he has a reason too, and that's what I saw. That I'm not sure about. But that comes down to, do I trust her to handle that? She says if that's the case she's never noticed it. And she hangs out with him and his wife just about as much as he hangs out with us. She works in a building right near them. My company is based out of Chicago and I live on one of the coasts. So my coworker friends are much more spread out. We can't go to the bar to grab after-work drinks any day like they can. Honestly, I usually go to their work hangouts more than mine because of that. I'm friendly with her CEO because of it. So is it perfect? No. But I've always trusted her. I've never had a reason not to. In 15 years, this is the first crack or dent in it. OOP gives a clearer description of what happened that day. That's not what I saw. She said something. He froze. Said something I couldn't hear and she said no, don't worry about it. He put something in the dishwasher and she walked him out to the front door. He didn't dive out the window. You have to remember this is Reddit. I'm not putting every single nuanced detail in this because that would take me hours to write, and I'm not putting my security footage on the internet for strangers to see. The reason I have the security system in the first place is because of a stranger on the internet. I'm not saying anything beyond that didn't happen for sure between them. I'm saying I don't know now and I don't have any proof. That's what my wife and I are discussing just about every day and what we are working through. The original point of the post was, the only thing we hadn't talked about was paternity because I don't want to put her in a situation where she medically loses the child. Mine or not. Not only have I not been able to put every single nuanced thing in this, I've also sprinkled in false details about our lives, nothing pertinent to what happened but other mundane details. I was a very small public figure at one point, and some lowlife from the internet traveled across the country to make death threats against us because of something warped in his head. To the point where the federal government had to get involved. People here are wildly jumping at conclusions with much less information than I have and ignoring the original point of the post and the original questions asked. Has he told Matt's wife she is my wife's friend's wife? We don't meet up and knit together. I know her through my wife. I see her maybe once every few months at a bar after work, or if they come by for dinner or to hang out. We aren't besties. Again, what should I tell her? Hey, your husband was at my house. I knew he was there and I saw him run a foam roller over the outside of my wife's hip while he was sitting on her feet. It's super obvious they are fucking, and even though I'm not sure, it's possible she's carrying his baby. This isn't a soap opera. There's nothing I know that I can tell her, so why would she take my word on what tiny evidence there is? And why or how in the world would that help my situation? If all of this is false now, I've destroyed my relationship by acting like a child trying to drum up drama for what obviously looks like being vindictive. And I put them in the same situation we are in now. For something that I don't know is true yet. I believe you have entirely lost the plot here. Update 2 August 21st, 2024. Hi folks. So I haven't been touching this account at all as I was mostly bombarded by people telling me I'm an AI, wishing my wife a miscarriage, claiming she's going to get a secret abortion to save herself. Or that I'm a clown for not keeping it real, and destroying someone else's marriage over speculation only. I'm amazed that people are still following this and invested in it after all this time. Here's where we are at. Yes, my wife is still very much pregnant. She's hard to pick things up off the floor stage. She's due in 8 weeks. Holy shit, 6 weeks actually. Just looked at the calendar. We are getting weekly ultrasounds at this point. He's already about 5 pounds and has a big ol' head. She and I had some very long direct conversations about everything. She is adamant that nothing has ever happened and nothing ever would. For a while she was pretty upset with herself for causing this and causing my feelings of doubt. I've done my best to remedy that as I've got to keep stress off her as much as possible right now. But it will for sure be revisited after the birth. As I've been saying the entire time, I'm really only worried about the child and the birth going well, etc. Well, mostly, maybe not only. The only thing we still really disagree on is I thought he was getting too close because he had developed feelings or was getting attention that he wasn't getting elsewhere, maybe, etc. She doesn't see it that way but has also said it's possible, but if so she was blind to it. I told her I wanted a paternity test and she immediately agreed to it and said no problem at all. My only stipulation was that it couldn't be medically risky or stress-inducing at all as she's a high-risk pregnancy. We both spoke to her doctors about it and they basically told us that our only option was to go to the courthouse because they wouldn't do one without the law involved. Which we both thought was ridiculous. Her doctor was a bit thrown off by it so I didn't press very hard. It was honestly her pretty much demanding it. I knew there were other options. I looked into those other options and ultimately decided to wait until the birth, and I have a lab already set up to do it, Ready to go. I'm 95% sure it's unnecessary, but I'm still getting one for my peace of mind and mostly so that nothing will come between me and my child. For those of you that have left me messages of support that I didn't get back to, thank you. I'm going to spend some time going through them tonight before I run off again. For those of you who've left messages that think I should be acting like a 17-year-old high school student and either getting violent, purposely cheating on my wife to prove a point, or other childish trash. Thanks for the entertainment at least. Stop watching TLC and TikTok. That dumbass drama ain't the way, kiddos. And to the one person who suggested I cause an accident with my wife, I hope you end up behind bars someday. It's really likely I'm not going to come back here after tonight until after I get the results from the lab. So if you're really still interested in the results, come back in 1.5-2 months. I've been told the results take about 48 hours once submitted. I'll give you your Maury moment then. OOP answers questions in a comment. Here, just as a preempt, I'm going to post something I responded to someone else on the last post just a minute ago, but I likely won't check this account until after the birth after this. Comment 1. People seem to be reading into the reasons I thought all this was more than what I said. I've seen dude, they were in bed together. You caught them. Or, they were cuddling under a blanket. Totally get how the telephone game works. But I never said any of that. So I'll clarify, I guess. Here's exactly what I saw. They were on the sectional couch in my living room at either end under the same large blanket, feet to feet. The massage. She was lying on the floor on her side. He was sitting by her feet and rolling one of those big foam rollers on her back and side, which is something I do all the time because she's been complaining about back and outer hip pain. Still enough for me to raise a concern with her. But people seem to be reading into that as they were basically dry humping and thought you couldn't see. Comment 2. I'm being told that I'm being oblivious and ignoring the obvious, and letting her and him off the hook. This is a direct comment I left someone giving my thoughts on that. I think they said something like, this is what guys who choose to have their head in the sand say. My response. Yeah, I'm pretty well aware of that. I've also stated many times that my wife is a high-risk pregnancy, so I've decided to try and not explode things until I know something for a fact and risk what would potentially be the only opportunity I have to have a child at my age. If it turns out I'm wrong and that happens because I blew all this up over nothing, I don't know how I could live with myself. And my marriage likely wouldn't survive that anyway. So, I don't see that as a winning option. If I deal with it calmly and like an adult, and if I'm wrong, then great, we can move on. And if I'm right, then it can still be dealt with accordingly with facts and not speculation. If the child is mine, and the birth goes well, then we have a healthy child and I can deal with the remainder of any damage she has or hasn't done without risking potentially the only child I'm going to have. Trust me. I'm not ignoring it, I'm choosing to support my wife to get through the pregnancy first. Then I'll deal with the rest of it. It's probably been the hardest thing I've ever done emotionally. But here we are. End of copied comment. I know I'm a sarcastic SOB in some of these comments, but honestly thank you for everyone's concern and I have gotten some good advice from people. Mostly this has been a bit cathartic to write all this down as most of my friends are toxic dudes who are more interested in fighting about golf or some other pointless shit. Love me. But I don't really have anyone other than her to talk to about any of this. So honestly, thank you. New updates. OOP added an update on the previous post. Quick update. Today is 9/14. We just got an induction date scheduled on the 26th. Update. 9/29, 1 a.m. Baby boy is here, born 9/27, 7 pounds 10 ounces. He had what the doctors in the OR said was the biggest meconium they've seen in a while on the table, so it was likely he was about 8 pounds when he was born. Labor was induced early morning on the 26th. Labor was like 30 hours. Pushed for like 3 HRS. No progress, ended up in a C-section. He's perfectly healthy and kind of a tank. I was almost a 10 pounds baby. Mom is dealing with recovery and not having a fun time, but we are getting there. We are being discharged on Tuesday, they tell us. We live about 2 miles from the hospital. So I've been going back to the house to shower and sneak in like an hour or two a couple times. Otherwise I've been here the entire time. As far as paternity, just out of all that entails with the birth of a newborn and recovery and honestly a bit of embarrassment. We haven't started the test, but it's set up and ready to start on Tuesday when we get out of here. So I'll give a final update after the results come back. So maybe another week to 10 days. My honest opinion after looking at this kid is, he is mine. Matt and I are physically very opposite. Different heritages. I'm 6'3", 240 pounds, he's probably 5'8", 175 to 180 pounds. I've always held the belief that babies all generically look the same other than obvious ancestral differences. But yes, this moose of a baby has some obvious traits that would only come from me. Still doing the test, but I'm very much not worried about it. I'll make a new post when I get the results back. Final update results are in October 10th, 2024 TLDR, child is mine. The baby is as healthy as could be so far. Mom, on the other hand, has been having issues. Baby was born on 9/27. Labor was 30 hours, ending in a C-section. 7 pounds 10 ounces. Mom, didn't do so well. We were supposed to be in for 4 days and ended up being 8 days. Mom has been back to the hospital twice since. I'm currently sitting in the car with the little guy because Mom's in the emergency room right now. She is making progress but still having a hard time with a few things. As I mentioned before, she has some pre-existing issues that we knew would make this hard. But there have been a few hurdles, but we are getting over them together. As far as paternity, the results came back this morning. Greater than 99.9999 match that I am the father. I did pretty much already know this, but now there is no question and I can put it behind me. My wife and I have had long conversations about all this leading up to the birth, especially around the time of the original post when all this started. We are in a good place, and while it's always going to be there, we both have things to work on communication-wise that came from all this. I did also see Matt today. That's been settled. I'm pretty satisfied that what I saw was it and there wasn't anything else beyond that, and it was a friend helping her with pain the same way I do. I do want to thank everyone who left a message or DM'd me. Good or bad comments, thank you. Talking to the void and all you strangers helped me wait this out. I appreciate it. I'm going to go enjoy my son's company now. Thank you again. Relevant comments. J7488 Congratulations. This may have gotten buried in the comments, but did your wife have a real understanding of the optics of what you saw? She realized how truly suspicious it looked. OOP, yay, she realizes it after she saw the video herself. Believable toadstool. Also, why are you still not informing Matt's wife of what you walked in on? Feels dishonest. She deserves to know and make her own decision. OOP, I didn't walk in on anything. His wife apparently was aware the entire time because Matt told her what was going on. An old friend who once called me a bad influence for being child-free now wants me to house his family of 5. First and foremost, this is not an article in which I question whether or not I did the correct thing. I am confident that I did. This is a rant about an emotional day, and the only people who will understand are those who do not have children. The gist: Dave, not his real name, a former acquaintance with whom I had lost touch for nearly 3 years, has recently contacted me again. He claims he has a house emergency and has to locate a place for himself, his wife, and their 3 children to stay while their home is being repaired. This is the same person who told me he couldn't be my buddy when I was going through a horrific experience because I'd be a poor influence on his children because I'm childless. A little background. The friendship ended because I was stressed out and upset. My father's death was just one of several awful events that occurred over the course of 3 months. I was looking for comfort, but Dave told me that being childless was a detrimental effect on their family. At the time, he was married with 2 children. In short, they didn't want to spend time with me because I wasn't worth anything compared to their more valuable pals. This was someone I had known since graduate school, and we had spent a lot of time doing enjoyable things together. Like rock climbing. Dave and I were part of a group of common friends who frequently rented out lake cottages or winter lodges for summer and winter sporting activities. We've been pals for over 10 years, and he suddenly deserted me because he decided I wasn't useful. It ached a lot, especially while I was coping with some very tragic situations. Even more so because I was there for him when he learned his mother had cancer and again at her death. As I previously stated, I hadn't spoken or contacted him in nearly 3 years. I attributed it to people being really odd after they have kids, that they slip into a conventional, conservative mindset in which anyone who isn't wanting or working toward a Leave It to Beaver 2.5 kids situation is somehow questionable. Then today, I received a text message from Dave. I never deleted or disabled his phone number, so his name remained saved and there it was. He asked me to allow him and his 3 children to stay at my place since their water heater had broken, and it was an emergency situation. He knows I now live in the same city as him, and it would be a huge help. And here's the kicker. It appears that he and his wife had a 3rd child after telling me I was a terrible influence. Co-baby, I suppose. My main question was, why ask me of all people? I asked Dave why he wanted me to do this for him. His reaction was essentially that he is out of alternatives and no one else has room for him and his 3 children, especially his 5-month-old. I asked him why he couldn't book a hotel room for them. He stated it would be very expensive and that they are in a lot of medical debt because their newest child had to be in the NICU when he was born. I said it sounded challenging, but why me? He said he knew I helped someone with emergency lodging last year and noticed I had plenty of extra space for guests. Because I was so generous then, I could be generous with him now. I knew precisely what he was talking about, but I wanted to know how he knew it. That scenario was touchy, and I assumed it was a private family affair. He claimed it was put on Facebook by the people I assisted. Quick segue. Around this time last year, one of my good college friends, Kate, who has lupus, contracted COVID-19. She was also being very careful. It sucked because this was before immunizations were made available to vulnerable populations. She's my age, in her mid-30s, and aside from lupus, she's in excellent health. In fact, she runs marathons. Kate's lupus exacerbated COVID, and she ended up in the ICU. Furthermore, she was pregnant, and her husband had to choose between saving her life and protecting the fetus. It was basically a choice between providing Kate with life-saving medicine and care at the price of the fetus or having her die. Fortunately, her husband is a decent guy and allowed the doctors to terminate the pregnancy in order to save her life. Kate's mother was a nightmare, claiming her daughter should have perished with the baby. She even attempted to arrange for a priest to perform Kate's funeral rites while she was in a coma. As expected, this resulted in a massive, dramatic fallout. Kate's brother and his wife urgently needed a place to stay away from their mother. I had an extra room and am conveniently located near the hospital. They stayed with me for 2 days before securing a hotel room in one of those long-term residential hotels. Nobody was sure Kate would make it out alive, so they naturally wanted to be nearby. They lived out of state and were living with their cruel mother while their sister was in the hospital. Fortunately, Kate got it out alive and has since disowned her mother. While in a coma, she recalls hearing others discussing the priest's attempted break-in. I welcomed Kate's brother and his wife into my home because they were lovely people, had always been supportive, and are still among the most kind people I know. Apparently, unbeknownst to me because I don't use Facebook, Kate's brother or wife posted something about how nice I was to help them out in a time of need, a ray of sunshine in what had been a very dark era for them. They told me directly, but I had no idea they had published the matter on social media. Let's get back to today. Dave saw those things last year, remembered it, and assumed I would welcome his family and children into my home with open arms. Honestly, I told him to shove it. I was furious that he was attempting to shame me into allowing him and his family into my home for an indeterminate period of time. He knows I don't have children. He even said that my lack of children was a poor influence on his family, but now that it's convenient for him, I'm no longer a bad influence. Now he believes he can waltz back into my life without even apologizing for the horrific things he said 3 years ago. I explained to him that being child-free means I do not want children in my home for a lengthy period of time. If I did, I would not be child-free. I was not going to interrupt my life or my 2 cats only to be a bed and breakfast for his 3 children. He stated I was selfish and should worry about his children, and that there is no hot water in his house. I told him, tough. You can use a credit card or ask a family to pay for a hotel stay. He made additional excuses, bringing up their medical debt again, and assured me that it would just be for a few days. I informed him that many days for a damaged hot water heater seems exceedingly suspicious. Things like these can be corrected rather fast. I am aware of our state's residency regulations, and if someone stays in someone's home for 7 days, they are entitled to tenant rights. I wasn't going to risk this becoming a situation in which I couldn't get rid of them. He told me off and threatened to spread the word on social media that I wouldn't help a family of 3 in an emergency and that I wanted innocent kids to suffer. I instructed him to pound sand and eat a dick. He hasn't been a friend for many years. He doesn't even know my address. All he knows is that I live nearby in the same city and that I'm alone. He can slam me on social media all he wants. I'm not on Facebook, therefore I don't care what a group of Karens thinks of me. I told him that social media is not real life. If he tells my actual friends about this, they will laugh in his face. I have all of his texts as proof of how he spoke to me, and I told him he used to be a kind person. We spent a lot of good times together, and I'm still terrible about his mother. I'm sorry he chose this road in life since it sounds like he's miserable, but he's a negative influence in my life, therefore I can't have him around. I'm confident he'll understand because he said the same about me. That was the gist of my last words to him. He took off till I blocked him. I'm very sad about it. He used to be a good person 10 years ago and his mother was a gorgeous woman. I'm now bracing myself for any flying monkeys who may emerge from the woodwork and try to shame me into taking care of his family. I can't wait to tell them to take his family with them. I've already discussed the problem with my 2 best buddies. They were both astonished by Dave's bravado and lack of shame. They believed it was suspicious because he was so insistent on getting into my home for days. One acquaintance reported that her water heater broke recently, and she had a plumber come out the same day. It only took a day to fix. His opposition to the hotel plan raised a red flag for them, and they're curious about the whole situation. I agreed that there is a sense of absence. I feel righteous about all of this. I know I did the right thing. I resent that a past act of compassion was turned against me. Years ago I felt he had a point, that I was somehow unworthy because I was depressed, and people dislike sad people. But now that I see things clearly, I see that he had a deeply flawed personality. It did bring back old melancholy memories. Anyway, thanks for reading if you got all the way through. I needed to get this off my chest and rant. Update on Dave's water heater. An old friend, who once described me as a negative influence on his family, now wants me to house his family. Well, I'm pleased, and a bit shocked, that most issues have been rectified barely over 24 hours after they began. I suppose this is one of the benefits of having people working for you behind the scenes. I also wanted to thank everyone who interacted with my last post. I appreciate the encouragement and knew you'd understand my outburst. RIP to my inbox, but I read everything. And you all are the best Reddit community. No trolls, which I believe is a Reddit miracle. So on to the update. I'm writing this while drinking hot tea and I encourage you to do the same. This is going to be long. The deal. All of your gut instincts were correct. It was suspected that a damaged water heater would force a family of 5 to seek an alternative home, especially because Dave does not even have a water heater. It was all a lie. All of you go, I knew it. So here's the deal. Dave sold his house 6 months ago, and he and his wife Shelley have been looking for a larger home ever since. As I am writing this, they are already in a motel with their children. They have a lot of hot water. I imagine you all bobbing your heads up and down, saying, yep, I knew it. You requested an update because the water heater excuse sounded strange, so here it is. Seriously, grab yourself some tea. My sister, who is in another time zone and has a few hours on me, appears to be looking into Dave. Her spouse worked as a PI throughout graduate school, and she has a professional talent to find information about people. She's a little spooky but in a good way. She also uses social media, but I do not. I gave her Dave's complete name and some information I knew about him, such as his prior residence, his wife's name, and the names of his children. She went into town. She told me that his house went on the market around 6 months ago and sold swiftly for significantly more than it was purchased for years ago. It's a seller's market, and this was a big sale. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Then she stated she checked around the city and adjacent towns and couldn't locate any records of him purchasing further land. It appeared that his house had sold, but nothing further occurred. So I texted my 2 friends from yesterday, telling them what my sister discovered and that it appears Dave sold his house and no longer has a water heater problem, because he doesn't have one. My friends were asking, WTF? Allison, one of the 2 pals, contacted my sister, and the 2 embarked on a social media journey. My sister was scared I was being duped. Allison was a graduate school classmate of mine and Dave over a decade ago. She wasn't particularly close to him, and he wasn't on her radar, but she was one of his Facebook friends. We learned more after people friended absolutely everyone they knew on Facebook. Around the same time, I heard from Kate's brother and sister-in-law, who had remained with me while she was in the hospital. Kate's sister-in-law, Laura, expressed gratitude for my donation on Facebook. She confirmed that she had posted 2 pictures, one of my cat, who appeared to be laying down the home rules, and one of my large Monster Deliciosa plant, which she adored. You may extract information about my home from the images, such as the clean and spacious kitchen and the great pantry, which will be useful later. Laura was humiliated when I told her what was going on, and she realized she might have been somewhat to blame for Dave wanting to get into my house. She deleted the post, untagged my name and provided me with a screenshot to prove it. She even asked if she could assist with anything else. I told her that my sister was obviously doing a deep dive and could use some assistance. I put Laura in touch with my sister. Laura then allegedly contacted Allison at random, and late in the morning, Allison requested screenshots of the specific parts in the text discussion where Dave stated that his problem was with the water heater and that he wanted me to care for his family and children for a few days. I gave it to her, and there was radio silence for the majority of the day. I mused, I wonder what's going on. In the early evening, I learned a lot more about the story. My sister, Allison, and Laura sent me texts. I'm going to try to lay it out, even if it's a little circuitous. Dave and his wife Shelley sold their home 6 months ago. They want additional space and bedrooms for their now 3 children and wanted to upgrade. Because it was a tremendous and volatile seller's market, their home was projected to have gained high 6 figures in equity since they purchased it. They were thrilled to put it on the market. Dave and Shelley wanted to earn top cash for the house, so they sold it without a condition that they must purchase a home before the new buyer could move in and legally take possession. Dave was certain that with the large sale, they could acquire another one shortly. Their home sold quickly, and there was a bidding war. Dave bragged about it. He and Shelley tried to buy another home, but it was not easy. They were outbid on all of the residences for which they bid. When the new owners took over the house, they had to move out. Dave and Shelley didn't think this was a big deal. A friend took them in with the understanding that it would be temporary and that they would be actively looking for a home. They tried, but were still outbid. They refused to reduce their expectations or change their budget. They wouldn't look at properties the same size as their previous one because the whole point of selling was to buy a larger home. They couldn't win any of the bidding wars, and Dave refused to raise the budget. Their third child was born prematurely and was in the NICU, so they do have medical debt. Dave did not want to spend any more money or take out new debts. So Dave, Shelley, and the 3 children went to someone else's house to stay. They kept looking for homes but couldn't find one. This happened again, this time at a third person's house. At this point, people began encouraging him that it could be a good idea to wait out the housing bubble until it was no longer a seller's market and then get an apartment in the interim. Dave batted this down since he said that an apartment costs the same as a mortgage. If he's going to pay for living expenses each month, it better be a mortgage. He considered paying for an apartment to be a financial drain. Shelley became further enraged at the suggestion. She didn't want to live in an apartment that was smaller than their prior home. Dave's family appeared to be overstaying their welcome. People were growing annoyed, and Dave and Shelley refused to chip in for groceries. Dave's family had now reached the 4th residence of folks offering to take them in. A month ago, they ran out of free housing alternatives. Hilariously, they were all sold out because people required the space for their own families visiting for the holidays. Nobody wants to take the freeloaders in anymore. Shelley is a city school teacher, and with the kids back in school, they felt compelled to remain in the city. Their only other possibilities for free accommodation were Dave's brother, who lives approximately 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who reside 6 hours away. Neither choice was ideal for Dave and Shelley's careers or for their children's access to in-person programs. Dave and his family needed to find housing right away, so they booked a motel. They were really upset because their children are loud, and the hotel personnel are constantly ordering them to be quieter. Dave and Shelley grumbled about how much they dislike living in hotels and how unfair it is that they can't afford a house despite having so much money. To be clear, they have more than enough money to get by living in a hotel, which is still significantly more expensive than renting an apartment. Dave likes the notion of the hotel because there is no need to sign a lease. They can go at any moment, and they have maid service. Shelley gets all poor me, saying that the kids are sad because they don't have a backyard to play in, and that staying in a hotel prevents them from being kids. Slight segue. Allison went back through Shelley's posts and discovered an incident in which Shelley and a group of her pals were not very polite about me. This occurred at the beginning of the pandemic. It was back when everyone was panicking out and buying up all the toilet paper. People also purchased a large quantity of food before it could be refilled due to panic buying. In the early evening, I learned a lot more about the story. My sister, Allison, and Laura sent me texts. I'll try to explain it, even if it's a little circuitous. Dave and his wife Shelley sold their home 6 months ago. They want additional space and bedrooms for their now 3 children and wanted to upgrade. It was a hot seller's market, and their home was projected to have gained high 6 figures in equity since they purchased it. They were thrilled to put it on the market. Dave and Shelley wanted to achieve the highest possible price for their home, so they sold it without first purchasing a new one. Dave was confident that with the big sale, they could obtain another one fast. Their home sold quickly, and there was a bidding war. Dave bragged about it. He and Shelley attempted to purchase another property, but it was a difficult process. Every home they bid on was won by someone else who bid higher. Dave and Shelley had to leave their old house when the new owners moved in. They didn't believe it was such a huge thing at first. A friend took them in, assuming it would be temporary and that they would be actively looking for a home. They tried but were still outbid. They refused to reduce their expectations or change their budget. They would not consider homes that were the same size as their previous one because the whole point of selling was to move into a larger home. They could not win any bidding wars, and Dave refused to raise the budget. To make matters worse, their third child was delivered prematurely and required care in the NICU, resulting in medical debt. Dave did not want to spend more money or take out more debts. So Dave, Shelley, and the 3 children went to stay at someone else's house. They continued to look for a home but were unsuccessful. This pattern repeated when they went to a third person's house. People began encouraging Dave that it could be a good idea to wait out the housing bubble, when it was less of a seller's market, and get an apartment in the meanwhile. Dave rejected this since he claimed that renting an apartment costs as much as a mortgage. He figured that if he was going to pay for living expenses on a monthly basis, it should be for a mortgage. He viewed renting a flat as a financial drain. Shelley became further enraged at the suggestion. She did not want to live in an apartment that was smaller than their previous home. Dave's family had overstayed their welcome. People were growing annoyed, and Dave and Shelley refused to chip in for groceries. Dave's family was now in their 4th place to stay. A month ago, they ran out of free housing alternatives. Ironically, they were asked to leave because folks needed to make room for their own relatives visiting for the holidays. Nobody wants to take in freeloaders anymore. Shelley is a school teacher in the city, and now that their children are back in school, they need to stay in the city. However, their only other possibilities for free accommodation were Dave's brother, who lives 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who reside 6 hours away. Neither choice was ideal for Dave and Shelley's careers, nor for bringing their children to in-person lessons. So Dave and his family booked a hotel. They were very upset because their children were being loud, and the hotel personnel kept ordering them to be quieter. Dave and Shelley talked about how much they disliked living in a hotel and how unfair it was that they couldn't afford a house despite having so much money. To be clear, they have enough money to stay in a hotel, but it is still significantly more expensive than renting an apartment. Dave loved the hotel idea because they didn't have to sign a lease, could leave at any moment, and had maid service. Shelley began playing the victim, claiming that the kids were sad because they didn't have a backyard to play in and that staying in a hotel prevented them from being children. Meanwhile, Allison went back and uncovered posts from Shelley in which she and a group of pals were talking negatively about me. This occurred at the beginning of the pandemic, when people panicked and purchased items such as toilet paper and food. Someone I knew from graduate school contacted me to see how I was doing. I assumed she was approaching me to offer support and be kind, but her true intention was to ask for part of my food. I've always kept a well-stocked pantry, a tradition passed down from my grandmother, who survived World War II. This acquaintance knew I had a good supply of food and requested me to give her some because I didn't have any children to feed. She stated her child was a picky eater and that I probably have some frozen chicken on hand. I was astonished by her audacity and told her that if she needed food, she could go to a food bank. I was not going to simply hand her my lunch since her child only ate homemade chicken nuggets. There was no food scarcity, it was simply panic shopping. I suggested that she go to the grocery store early in the morning, when they usually refill, and she'd be able to obtain chicken. She labeled me selfish and brought it to social media, where she conversed behind my back with other spouses of graduate school colleagues. Back to Shelley, she sided with the woman who had tried to persuade me to give her my frozen chicken. Shelley also thought I was selfish for not assisting a mother out. She even commented that it was weird for me to keep so much food around while I lived alone, implying that I definitely had difficulties. If you guessed Dave's bad influence comment about me was planted by his wife, you'd be correct. When Laura posted about my generosity in allowing her and her husband to stay at my house for a few days while Kate was in the hospital, Shelley originally commented sweetly, stating how nice it was of me to do so and how lovely my home looked. But behind the scenes she wasn't as nice. Shelley's recent tweets moan about how sad her children are because they don't have a backyard to play in, and how staying in a hotel prevents them from being kids. Then, just 2 days ago, she tweeted about finding a new home for her family that was so cute and had a fantastic kitchen. Dave texted me unexpectedly after 3 years of no communication, claiming he had a damaged water heater and asking me to host his family for a few days. You all know I told him no. My pals noticed that Dave and Shelley made passive-aggressive comments on social media this morning about how bad society is nowadays when friends refuse to aid families in need. Shelley grumbled that their new home had fallen through and received a lot of sympathy from her Karen pals. She claimed her children were quite disappointed. I believe this is when Allison requested screenshots of Dave's water heater sob tale. Allison went on a tear, uploading the screenshots and revealing that Dave and Shelley never had a new home scenario planned. They were simply trying to influence me by lying. Regarding a damaged water heater, I had never agreed to having them stay in my home. Laura confronted them for attempting to take advantage of me. Allison went on a rage over the situation that occurred 3 years ago. My true friends, like Allison, were very supportive, whereas Dave was indifferent, saying, "Yeah, I don't care," and branding me a bad influence on his family. Allison informed everyone about Dave labeling me a terrible influence because of my child-free lifestyle. And how stupid it was for him to believe he could simply stroll back into someone's life after criticizing them. Allison, who is childless, found it particularly offensive. People began chastising Dave for being so nasty before requesting favors. People began calling him cheap and a leech, and the situation appeared to escalate. Some of the folks who had let his family stay with them for the previous 6 months came out of the woodwork to criticize him. One guest mentioned how filthy Dave's family was and how much extra cleaning they had to perform. They claimed his children had no manners, frightened their dogs, and that it was a relief when they eventually departed. People were outraged that Dave and Shelley had sought to deceive me and then portray me as the bad guy on social media. People I hadn't spoken with in a long time came out to defend me, telling Dave I was a decent person and reminded him of how I had helped them in graduate school. It was quite good to hear. Some even commented that I had helped them acquire jobs, which was more than Dave had ever done. I'm quite involved in the graduate school networking scene, and I appreciate sharing career prospects and mentoring others, especially those looking for scientific jobs. Even Dave's own brother expressed displeasure at Dave's behavior. He remembered how much I had helped them when their mother died and stated that if she knew how Dave treated others, she would be rolling in her grave. My sister ended up getting me on Zoom with her and screen sharing her display to show me what all the fuss was about. Perhaps this is why I never received mail accusing me of not allowing a family into my home. I expected some blowback, but I never received it. Oh God, schadenfreude. Dave had threatened to put me on blast on Facebook, but he ended up getting blasted himself. How ridiculous, how utterly idiotic. I have text messages from him lying about the goddamned water heater. He must have assumed that because I was not on social media, I would be unable to inform others that he was lying or that I would be unaware that he was truly enjoying hot water at his hotel. I feel like I escaped a nuclear-tipped rocket. After work, I had to pour myself a drink and ponder about it all. After examining everything, I believe Dave and Shelley intended to try to squat in my house. Dave went off when I cited the 7-day rule, which allows tenants to gain rights in our state. I felt something was fishy, and you all did too. I believe Dave was a cheap bastard who didn't want to pay extra for a hotel, didn't want to rent an apartment, and had exhausted all of his in-city free lodging options with pals. It was their last desperate attempt. Shelley knew I was welcoming to visitors, and they both knew my home was clean and well stocked with food for their children. They already had a reputation for eating people out of their homes. If they had stayed with me for a week, they would have been tenants, and I would have had to go through the legal process to evict them. It may have taken several months. It is much easier to con a single person and force them out of their own home than to try the same trick on friends with children and limited space. He was simply seeking for free housing so he could invest every dime he had towards his goal of purchasing a 4+ bedroom house with the proceeds from the sale of his previous home. I don't know for sure, but it makes sense. So I decided to send him one final SMS. I unblocked him and sent this message before reblocking his number. Hey Dave, I found out you were lying about the water heater. You don't even have one. You're staying in a hotel while sitting on a large sum of money from selling your old property. I think it's incredibly shady of you to lie to me and try to get into my home to leech off of me, especially since you wrecked our friendship by calling me a terrible influence on your family. I didn't tell you back then, but I'll tell you now, you are trash. Your mother would be embarrassed of you. I see it as all projection since you're a negative influence on not only my life but also the lives of others. If you truly believed that I was a terrible influence, you would not have attempted to bring your family into my home this week. But if you still think I'm a terrible influence, you won't have to worry about me aiding you or doing you any favors in the future. I will keep my evil influence away from your family. Oh, and Shelley appears to have become a genuine treat. Because I am not a monster, the final thing I will do for you is remind you that you must fulfill your responsibilities as a husband and father by providing a secure dwelling for your family. Stop playing those freeloader games. Here is a link to our local Craigslist housing page. I am confident you will find something. Oh, and I hope to see you at our next non-Zoom alumni event. I'm sure it will be wonderful to catch up in person. So it's finished. I said my piece. Once again, you were all correct. Something else was going on. I'm really sick right now. How could someone conceive of doing this to me? I'm also feeling ill at the thought of admitting them into my house. That would have been a nightmare. My fiancé's best man is planning to slut-shame me during his wedding speech as a joke, and I'm unsure how to handle it. What should I do? Original post April 1st, 2024. My fiancé, best man, groomsman, and I have known each other since we were kids. We collectively met between 6th and 7th grade and have been running around in the same friend group ever since. The group has grown and shrunk over the years, but a small core of us have remained extremely close. Recently, my fiancé's best man Jay, 30M, has been making jokes when we're hanging out about the two of us dating that have now escalated. Admittedly, when I met Jay in 6th grade, I had the hugest crush on him, and everyone knew. I was much taller than average for a girl at that age, and he was one of 2 guys in the entire school as tall as me. That, though, is where the story ends. I had one hell of an awkward phase in middle school, and he was very clear from the start that he was not into it. Post-awkward phase, as friends and adults, it was something we constantly joked about, but never seriously, since everything between us had always been platonic. This joke of me being rejected by him has now recently turned into how he dated me first, whenever fiancé and I are around. Despite the inaccuracy and an increase of it being brought up, everything has remained pretty lighthearted in context and, while annoying, is something I have been able to brush off or quickly rebuttal. This escalated this weekend when 2 of fiancé's groomsmen were over hanging out with fiancé and I. The wedding was brought up, and after a concerning look between the two, they mentioned something had happened with Jay they thought we should know about. Apparently Jay had been telling them stories he was considering for his best man speech, with the main one centering around how I had been shared around and had made my way through the entire friend group. While they kept what was explicitly said fairly vague out of respect for me, they were clear it crossed the line and insisted I had slept with the entirety of the group attending the wedding. They were very clear with Jay that he could not say anything like this in his speech, toast. Jay responded with an "I know," stating that I had already made it clear my maid of honor would be proofreading all speeches prior to the wedding, so he wouldn't be able to get away with it anyway. But ended the conversation by saying something along the lines of, "But what if I could?" Leaving the possibility open. Of all the groomsmen in the party, 6 including Jay, these 2 were the only ones in this core friend group, and the only ones I had any sort of history with that could potentially be notable. It was all prior to high school and very innocent. One I went on my first movie date with, where our parents had to drop each of us off because we couldn't drive, and picked us up afterwards. The other was the classic first 6-month relationship in middle school where it took 6 weeks to muster up enough courage to hug each other between classes in the hallway. Sure, we made out and very middle school level things happened, but this is something we've all laughed about now for over a decade. I wasn't the only girl in this larger friend group, and throughout the years, this was something that happened pretty frequently. Because we grew up in a smaller area, overlap happened like this regularly in every group and even more so as we went through high school. My fiancé is the only one I have seriously dated or had any sort of intimate relationship with of this friend group. We had an on-again, off-again relationship throughout high school that ended for a bit once I moved out of state for college, but we remained close friends and eventually reconnected when I moved back in 2019. We started dating in 2021 and got engaged in 2023. He's the only one in all of this I've ever slept with, who has seen me naked, and so on, making this situation even more odd and off-putting. Jay and I have been close friends since high school. When fiancé was in a toxic relationship that isolated him from Jay after I'd left for college, Jay would reach out to me for advice on school, girls, relationships and more. He had always been our #1 supporter, advocating for fiancé and I to reconcile our relationship throughout college and into adulthood. He even took a bit of credit and would throw around an "I told you so" here and there when we eventually did reconnect. I'm not sure how to handle this. I could write an additional post about how frustrated, confused, wronged, and uncomfortable I feel, all of which I plan to discuss in more detail with fiancé after sitting on the issue for a bit longer. We've all talked about it, recognizing the way Jay is framing things is wrong, but fiancé and the groomsmen are able to brush it off in a way I feel like I can't. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Additional information: fiancé and I aren't getting married until the end of next summer. So much of the conversations we had about toasts and speeches have been more theoretical, except that a few have asked for the opportunity to give a toast, including best man. We have loosely put this information in Save the Dates, on the website, and other prints. Fiancé and best man have been best friends since kindergarten. They were neighbors and inseparable until they each went their own way for college. My fiancé's parents basically raised him alongside fiancé. Jay has strictly only ever expressed platonic feelings for me. Even when both single, or alone together, we have only ever acted as friends towards each other after the embarrassing early middle school crush I had. TLDR, my fiancé's best man is lying about having history with me as well as my history with others, proposing the idea that he calls me out as a joke for being shared around their friend group in his best man speech, toast at our wedding. I don't know how to move forward from this or what to do next. Update April 3, 2024. First, I wanted to thank those who were clear and honest about how alarming the situation was from their perspective. When posting, I was still processing various feelings about the matter, and still am, which not only limited my ability to really look at the situation from a different perspective, but also left me in a state of paralysis of what to do next, both long and short term. Given the nature of this situation, there was a lot of historical context that was omitted to avoid making the original post too lengthy. I have done my best to include the context that seems most relevant based on the original comments in my update below. Update. Since posting, I have spoken in further detail to both my fiancé and one of the other groomsmen. I also confided in my maid of honor about the situation for an additional perspective outside of this specific friend group. After these conversations and reading through all comments on the original post, I've come to realize the significance of a few key details. Jay has a deep-rooted superiority complex. He always has, and it is something many in our friend group have become accustomed to. He has always been the type who seemed to believe he was the standout amongst his friends. Whether that be through education, athletics, his career, or with women. Jazz has also always been a bit egocentric, and a lack of accountability or consequences for his actions has been growing for some time now. Despite it almost always being unintentional, he more often than not is oblivious to the inconveniences and harm he causes others, as long as it is beneficial to his personal ego. This is about jealousy from a few different angles, but not about me specifically. When looking at the full picture, this escalation feels like a continued attempt to knock my fiancé down for reaching that next stage in life. Whether that is because fiancé has reached it before him or has moved onward without him, I cannot say for sure. Jay has issues with misogyny that have also been escalating in tangent with everything else. His lack of respect for the women he has dated has also seemed to increase. Much of the personal tension he and I have had recently pertained to his perspective of women that have begun to veer into a more disrespectful realm, alluding to an increased belief that due to their gender alone, women are inferior. The good friend he was to me over the years, who was always kind and supportive, who never overstepped boundaries and was always there when needed, can exist in tangent with the above information. They are not mutually exclusive. Life happens and people grow, sometimes in opposite directions. I spoke in depth with one of the groomsmen to have further transparency of the situation and what was explicitly said. He acknowledged that the conversation initially centered around the excitement they had for the wedding, and Jay clearly stated he wanted to give fiancé and I the best wedding and experience possible. The conversation evolved and Jay mentioned looking for icebreakers for his speech toast and began bouncing a variety of distasteful jokes that focused more so on the expense of my fiancé than anything else. Then the idea was proposed about explicitly stating that my being passed around the friend group was how they all remained relatively close since middle school and high school. Jay was immediately shut down by the other groomsmen, told to know his audience, and also recognize he was openly alluding to things that were untrue and that could have an extremely negative impact on me personally. The conversation stopped shortly after this and the groomsmen, without context of how this issue had been escalating, chalked it up to a one-off situation with Jay acting full of himself in the moment. Fiancé and I are the first of our cohort to get married and have a full-blown wedding with a ceremony and reception. These comments did not start escalating until after our engagement roughly 1 year ago, following Jay's breakup with his long-term girlfriend. Jay has never made comments like this to me or my fiancé privately or when it is just the three of us together. Any scenario where this has been an issue has been in an environment which involved others, and mostly others that are not a part of this cohort from middle school. So what next? As mentioned in my original post, I spoke with fiancé in detail about the situation and how I was feeling. When all of this had been brought to our attention a few days prior, in an attempt to preserve myself in the moment, I brushed it off more so than I probably should have. I do not blame fiancé for not having any immediate or strong reaction in the moment, because I had avoided one myself. I think it's important to note that Jay is not a day-to-day character in our lives. While he travels frequently for work that brings him to our area, we live states apart. He has not lived in the same area as me or my fiancé since high school. Much of this evolution with his personality has happened in the last few years as well. I recognize this is not an excuse for the lack of accountability on our part, but felt it added important context that this was not something that was observed and ignored daily, but one that has slowly been recognized over time, since we maybe see him 4 times a year at most. Fiancé was extremely open in conversation, immediately brought up having a conversation with Jay, but admitted to not viewing this as anything more than Jay just being Jay and that he was all talk. At this point, we had only discussed how Jay had continually escalated the situation and how uncomfortable I had now become from this. The lack of accountability fiancé had made for Jay's action definitely hurt, but then I recalled a commenter who had asked if I still considered Jay a friend because he actually was, or because that was how it has always been. To sum up what turned into a lengthier and much more productive conversation with fiancé, I told him that while I recognized his friendship with Jay was something that had always been a part of his life, I did not personally want to be friends with him anymore after this. I brought to fiancé's attention that while the scenario was explicitly about me, and attacking the integrity and character of a 12-year-old girl. Every action or usage of the scenario was used against him to invalidate his accomplishments of getting married or make him come off as less than. I told fiancé it was up to him on how he handles his conversation with Jay. But regardless, the disrespect Jay had shown me in this was a clear statement of what he thought of our own personal friendship. I firmly believe it is not my place to force how my fiancé handles his own personal relationship with Jay in this. All of this was deeply taken to heart, and you could tell that fiancé had started coming to his own realizations as the conversation progressed. He recognized that if the roles were reversed, or if it had been any one of my bridesmaids slandering me or him in any way, he would be firmly advocating for me to reevaluate my friendship with them. Fiancé asked for a few days to stomach the information himself and reflect on what he wants to say to Jay. He asked if it would be acceptable for him to bring up that I no longer wanted to be friends with Jay personally, and I said yes. I was clear that if Jay wanted to talk with me following their conversation as well, it would need to be the three of us and not a personal conversation. I am still evaluating how to approach the speeches toasts at our wedding and be open to perspectives and ideas. For now, I reserve the right with my fiancé to omit Jay from giving a speech and having my fiancé choose another groomsman to do so in his place, potentially canceling the speeches toasts altogether, and if Jay is allowed to give a toast, telling the DJ to cut the mic if need be. All of which he agreed with. There is still plenty of time for the situation to develop, and for potential future updates, but I wanted to again thank those that emphasized the seriousness of this issue, gave their honest input and advice on how to handle the situation, and provided perspective on what they believe should be done next. When originally posting, I was still in a state of shock, trying to accept the situation as it had unfolded. Your responses constructively pushed me into the reality of what was happening, and what I was feeling. Relevant comments. Additional info, miserably winning. Wow, I have a couple of comments. How were you fiancé friends with this guy for that long and been okay with his behavior? Why is his best man so comfortable to even joke about something like that? Why does he need time to digest cutting him off? Why is he even still involved in the wedding? Personally, I wouldn't allow anyone to disrespect my significant other, let alone someone I'm supposed to be marrying. Best man or not. I think they are both walking red flags. Jay for being a misogynist and your fiancé for not cutting him out of the wedding and his life. These things can be taken as a joke for sure, but the level of disrespect is too great, and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. OOP happy to answer, since I think it will be helpful for many. I also added a very small edit to the update to acknowledge a bit of this. Much of this behavior has developed over time and apart from all of us. As a kid he always had a superiority complex, but he was also very kind and respectful. It came off more as immaturity than anything else. Plus, at the time, we were kids too. Following high school, Jay and I each moved a significant distance away from where we grew up. He still lives that far away. We get together maybe 4 times a year at most, and I genuinely believe he did not see me as more than some woman to use as collateral to knock his friend down when he made those comments. Fiancé has no brothers, and Jay has always been a part of his life, filling that space. Jay also has no immediate family in his life and hasn't for quite some time, making fiancé's role a bit more impactful. It is much more similar to him cutting off a brother than just another friend. Fiancé has also always been extremely kind and had a very peaceful soul. Don't get me wrong, while fiancé prefers to avoid conflict, he has always been willing to stand up when necessary as well. I don't believe he realized how much had been at his expense as of late until after our conversation. Given their long history, I believe he's reflecting on a lot more than just this specific situation. The wedding is still over a year away, and not until the end of next summer. And this all has happened in less than a week. Neither fiancé nor I have talked with Jay yet, so I did not feel it was right to post about any hard decisions regarding cutting him from the wedding, and so on. These things can be taken as a joke, but the level of disrespect is too great, and your fiancé should stick up for you if he has any shroud of decency and respect for you as his fiancé and soon-to-be wife. This was a huge part of the larger conversation we had and something my fiancé acknowledged as well. I think initially, it was viewed under the lens of us collectively being childhood friends, and fiancé as the mediator, rather than the lens of me as his wife until our second, much larger conversation. OOP's reply about the fiancé's reaction: it's only been a handful of days since this all came to light. I wish your fiancé's reaction had been more about coming to your defense than Jay's, but understand that sometimes people need time to truly process all that contributes to a messy situation, especially one with deep roots and close ties. Thank you for conveying this so well. I did my best to add an emphasis to this, but could not do so as well in my own words and fear it got lost in the length of the post, something for me to work on in future posts for sure. I very much have worries, and knowing my personality, will also be worried day of. I expressed this to my fiancé as well, and he completely understood. I recognize there is still plenty of concern to still address with my fiancé, but given how fresh this situation is, I wanted to afford myself a little grace of absorbing my feelings for what has happened before figuring out exactly what to do. I lost a friend too. New update 2 October 11th, 2024. I'm considering canceling our wedding and calling off our engagement over a pizza. TLDR. After canceling his health insurance without discussion or my knowledge, and a severe lack of support, consideration and accountability, I'm considering calling everything off. Buckle up, because this is a long one. While the drama around my fiancé's best man has simmered, the deeper issues surrounding a lack of support have not. Apologies in advance for this not being centered around my fiancé's best man. Not much has honestly changed. A conversation between them was had, much of which was my fiancé assuring him that things would blow over and accommodating Jay's stresses, that it was only a joke. While my fiancé acknowledged what was said was wrong, the conversation wasn't to set boundaries. I eventually had to have my own conversation with Jay that my fiancé stood silently in the room for. I reached my breaking point 2 weeks ago. Following everything with his best man and a few other challenges we'd been facing, I tried putting my best foot forward these past 6 months. I sought out therapy to address the lack of support and anxiety I was feeling, and have made intentional efforts to work on our relationship to ensure we were in a stronger place before committing to each other. In May, after some unexpected and startling health concerns requiring an emergency room visit, my fiancé came clean to me about secretly canceling his health insurance in January without talking to or telling me. When I asked him why, he blamed the cost of the wedding being too expensive and wanting to save the $150 a month, taking no other accountability for his actions, outside of an apology. I have a small amount of experience in accounting and have budgeted the wedding down to the last dollar. This has included the consideration of inflation and other potentials as well. In total, from the smallest decoration to the cost of a marriage certificate, everything comes down to around $22,000, all of which I have strategically budgeted for throughout our 2-year engagement. My parents have graciously given us $14,000 as well to help with the expenses, and I have personally taken on the price of my dress, wedding bands, and a slightly larger portion of the vendors. To put it simply, while it may not be as much as others, we have privilege. Not only was there no need for this cancellation, but I have yet to see any of that additional support for expenses. Regardless, in response, I took it upon myself to take more of the costs on and pursue a part-time job on top of my full-time position that earns roughly $70,000 a year. While it's not by a large margin, I do make the most between us individually, and have a larger responsibility in my daily work life with longer hours and a significant level of expected travel as a result. The choice to take on a part-time role was not one of want, but of desire to ease the burden he was feeling. I started a role reviewing blogs, essays, resumes, and other forms of writing in July, and our relationship quickly unraveled. Because I commute, I typically arrive home 3 hours after my fiancé. After arriving, I would immediately have to hop on my laptop and review writings for the next 2 hours or so to stay on top of my quota. I tried my best to make a routine out of it, so we would have intentional time together once I finished each night. This was met with cold shouldering, frustration, and a lack of consideration for my level of exhaustion and strain for months. Anytime I asked him to choose a show to watch or decide on dinner, he usually does cook because I get home so much later. While I revised, I was met with scoffs and accusations that I no longer cared to tend to our relationship. I tried countless times to address his frustrations and was shut out or cornered in a circular argument about my priorities. 2 weeks ago, I was slated to travel for my full-time position to Atlanta during Hurricane Helene. In a matter of 12 hours, my afternoon flight for the next day was shifted to one leaving at 5 a.m., to give me ample time to shelter in place prior to the arrival of the storm. I rushed home to finish packing and prepare myself to drive over an hour to the airport and stay at a hotel nearby for additional flexibility in case of issues surrounding my early travel that next morning. After arriving home, I immediately hopped in the shower and asked my fiancé to order dinner so we could have one final meal together. During my shower, he offered to order a hot honey, jalapeno, and pineapple pizza from a new place we'd been wanting to try. Which I normally would have been happy to try. However, I don't like jalapeno the way some people don't like cilantro, and am avidly against pineapple on pizza. Something that's come up multiple times during our relationship. And while I'm good with spice, the idea of taking that on with the travel stress and early start time I had the next day made me hesitant. I calmly asked if there was another option for tonight and if we could try that specific pizza once I got home instead, expressing my concerns over my nerves, which received a frustrated scoff and sarcastic response of, "What then? Just cheese? I explained any other topping combination would work, and restated my issues. He walked out of the bathroom without response and I finished my shower. The pizza was never ordered, no food was ordered. I followed up as soon as I got out of the shower, asking if there was another option he wanted or a place he wanted to consider, and received a prompt no. As I finished getting ready, I asked if anything had been ordered again, and no. I finally snapped and begged and demanded him to order the hot honey pizza because I was out of time. He accused me of making him feel like he's forcing me into the decision, but after a bit of back and forth, the pizza was ordered and the mood immediately shifted. Everything was peaceful, warm, and loving at home up until I left. Yet I cried the entire hour and 15-minute drive to the airport hotel. I cried the entire next day, throughout the storm in Atlanta, and the entire day after. Following a lack of sleep, stress, and intense emotions, I had a complete mental breakdown, realizing I can't live like this. I called my fiancé and poured out every frustration, emotion, and feeling, which I admit was probably not presented in the best light, but none of it was well received. In the 2 weeks since, despite many attempts, conversations have gone nowhere, with only ultimatums being offered for me to make. I've proposed countless alternatives that focus on us working on ourselves and together these next few months, but he is only seeking an answer to whether or not we will be getting married next summer, and has made it known this is a decision that must be made by the end of October. At this point, I don't see how I can possibly gain the confidence to commit myself to him by next summer. For the sake of not doubling the length of this post, I will leave it at this for now. All of this is being discussed with my therapist. At this time, he has chosen not to pursue counseling with me, despite my asking and advocating. Many words have been expressed, and I'm trying. But I'm starting to second guess and waver on just how far love can get me through all of this. My new landlord enters without permission, removes my curtains, and even calls me sweetie. What should I do? New landlord hates privacy. I recently found myself needing a month-to-month lease for between 6 months to 14 months in Baltimore, which I was unfamiliar with. The apartment I found is a small efficiency in an older building. They agreed to a standard lease for the first 6 months, followed by month-to-month lease. I was to be the first tenant. When I toured it 6 weeks ago, workers were painting the rooms. The landlord's son is living upstairs, and this is my landlord's first time renting. The lease was obviously pulled from a form and seems standard. There is a clause in the lease which states that I can't install curtains, rods or hooks. This seemed standard as well. I had something similar at my old apartment. I assumed there would be some sort of curtain provided, and this was in regards to additional curtains. I moved in on Sunday, and found the landlord had not installed curtains at all. At this point, I assumed the issue with curtains was the potential to damage the wall. So I bought tension rods that require no hardware and used them to hang curtains. Monday afternoon I got a text from my landlord saying I needed to remove the curtains. The building is on a street corner with a fair amount of foot traffic. Between the 4 windows, you can see all of my apartment with the exception of the portion of the bathroom with the toilet and tub. Not only does this mean I have no privacy, but the neighborhood is slightly sketchy after dark. The nearby buildings have bars on their windows. Anyone passing by not only can see my possessions, but whether or not I am home. I expressed this to the landlord in my reply over text. He replied to reread my lease. I left them up overnight. I had orientation this morning and came back to find the curtains removed and nowhere in the apartment. I discovered this before entering the building, as 2 guys were outside one of my windows and looking in my apartment. They left when I entered the building. I messaged the landlord saying he didn't have the right to enter the apartment and asked for the curtains back. He again said to check my lease and then commented that I needed to finish unpacking as it looked messy in my apartment. I had to head to a work event so I couldn't follow through more, but I moved my electronics to one corner and used a bookshelf to block one of the windows so they weren't visible. While at the event I got a text from the landlord with a picture of the blocked window, captioned, "What's this? What can I do to prevent my landlord from entering the apartment unannounced and to compel him to allow some form of curtain? Alternatively, how do I break my lease 3 days into it? This is too crazy for week 1. Update. Privacy-hating landlord. It looks like I'm staying, but I took control of the situation. Not long after posting, it became apparent at work that the length of time I would be needed on this project is significantly lower than outside estimates originally said. Finding new arrangements seemed impossible. I mentioned what was going on at dinner, and included at the table was the company's lawyer, who I know, who offered to review the lease on an unofficial basis. Wednesday morning, I called the police about the stolen curtains because I wanted a paper trail. They gave me a police report, but were uninterested in speaking to my landlord. I reported the theft to my insurance, gave them the info on who stole them, text from the landlord, And they said they would be contacting someone in the city. It's only $200, but that's the point of the thing. I next bought room dividers, which in no way, shape or form can be considered curtains, blinds, etc., but block the windows while still letting in light. They were only $40 each. At the same time I searched the whole apartment, vents, lights, etc., and can't find any cameras as someone suggested. By that time, my friend who is a lawyer called me. She did a little review of the lease and the local laws. She said Baltimore has really shaky laws on when a landlord can come in, but pointed out that in my lease there is a clause that says the landlord will notify 48 hours prior to entrance, and will call prior to entering in case of emergency. She drafted me a letter to send to my landlord. Her name won't appear anywhere, but said it can be on my company's letterhead. The letter details some of my rights as a tenant, quotes the lease and reminds him he is bound by these rules as well. I signed and sent it immediately. I had mentioned wanting a security camera, and my company is arranging to have a camera sent that will automatically upload video off-site, work for an hour battery life if the electricity is out, and operate on cellular, so it doesn't need Wi-Fi. It will be here tomorrow. I also made the decision to send my PS4 and my cameras back to my home. My personal and business laptops I will just keep with me while I am out of the apartment. This leaves the only real valuables as my TV and the security camera itself. Everything else is books, clothes, and kitchen things. I ordered a sign outside that says the property is monitored by security cameras, and got a jamb for the door that holds it closed while I'm inside. I'm prepared for the landlord to make my life hell, but if he breaks the lease, my plan is to ask the company to move me into an extended stay hotel for the duration of my trip. It will be more expensive for them, but that's company policy for trips less than 4 months. At the moment, I feel as safe as I can in this situation. Updates. Landlord texted me, "Sweetie, I didn't think you'd be like this." Responded, "I'm not you, sweetie, I'm your tenant. My name is Nee, please use it." My aunt posted a video exposing my parents calling me a freeloader, despite all I've done for them. My name is Cameron, and I grew up in the shadow of a star. That star represented my older sister, Lily. Our house was usually full of people, uncles, aunts, cousins, you name it. They'd crowd into our backyard like ants at a picnic, drawn by the promise of my mother's wonderful barbecue and the opportunity to see Lily play. Our backyard was like a stage, with its beautifully groomed lawn and the large oak tree providing the perfect backdrop. Dad would light the grill, the aroma of charcoal and sizzling meat filling the air, while Mom went around making sure everyone had a drink in hand. "Lily, sweetie," Aunt Marge would call out, her voice cutting through the din, "why don't you give us a little song?" All eyes would immediately turn to my sister. Lily would bounce into a chair, her golden curls bouncing and a naughty sparkle in her eyes. She'd clear her throat dramatically and then, like magic, belt out * "My heart will go on * in her best Celine Dion impersonation. The adults would go wild, clapping and yelling as if they were at a live concert. Mom and Dad were beaming with joy, and Dad frequently wiped a tear from his eye. Meanwhile, I'd stand to the side, attempting to blend in with the shrubs. It wasn't that I didn't want to participate, but every time I opened my mouth to sing, it sounded like a cat being strangled. What about poetry? Forget about it. The words would jumble on my tongue, leaving me red-faced and stammering. My family has whispered that I am so unlike my sister. Not only were the relatives present, but Mom and Dad made it plain who the family's star was. While Lily was shuttled between ballet courses, singing lessons, and art workshops, I was left to my own devices. Not that I cared much. I sought refuge in the dusty old books that adorned our shelf. The only person who appeared to understand me was Great Aunt Maggie. She'd discover me hidden behind the garage or in the treehouse, nose buried in a book. "What adventure are you on today, Cameron?" she'd ask, snuggling down next to me. I would look up, thankful for the interruption. "Oh, just reading about ancient Egypt," I'd say, showing her the cover of my most recent find. Maggie nodded, her eyes gleaming. "You have a good head on your shoulders, girl. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Those moments with Maggie were like a balm for my soul. She did not ask me to perform or be anything other than who I was. With her, I could simply be Cameron, the quiet bookish girl who preferred the company of paper and ink to the commotion of family gatherings. But, as much as I treasured those memories, they couldn't take away the agony of being the neglected child. Every time Lily learned a new song or received an award, my parents would lavish her with praise and gifts. New clothes, the latest electronics, you name it. Lily got it, what about me? I received hand-me-downs and signs of frustration. School became my refuge. While I wasn't the most popular student, I did find my rhythm in class. I wasn't content to simply sit there and let the lessons wash over me. No, I was determined to understand what the lecturers stated. Mrs. Thompson, I'd say after class, my voice soft but steady, could you please explain that bit about mitosis again? I didn't quite understand it. She would smile, clearly pleased with my involvement. Of course, Cameron. Why don't we discuss it together? If a teacher couldn't spare the time, I'd request book recommendations. My backpack quickly became overloaded with extra reading material. I'd stay up late studying those books, trying to master every subject. All of that hard work paid off. By the time I entered high school, I was at the top of my class. For once in my life, I was the best at something. I even made a few friends, other bookworms who didn't mind my quiet personality. As graduation approached, our home became Lily Central. Mom was continuously assisting her in putting together her portfolio for the advertising and public relations department at a prestigious college. "Oh honey, this campaign idea is perfect," Mom would enthuse when she looked at Lily's work. "You're so talented." I'd roll my eyes and retreat to my room, engrossed in my studies. But one night, over yet another family meal centered on Lily's college ambitions, something in me broke. "I'm going to college too," I blurted out. "I want to study management." The hush that ensued was deafening. Then, to my surprise and hurt, they all started laughing. "Oh sweetie," Mom murmured, brushing away her tears. "We don't have the money for that. You'll need to acquire a job following graduation. You're simply not as talented as your sister." I felt as though I had been slapped. But I'm the top student in my class," I stammered, angry and embarrassed. "I get straight A's." I raced inside my room and returned with my report card, slamming it on the table. They all leaned in to look, their eyes widening in amazement. "Well, I'll be damned," Dad said, scratching his head. "When did this happen?" "It's been happening for years," I snapped. "Not that any of you ever noticed." Mom had the decency to show shame. "Cameron, we had no idea," she began, but Dad interrupted her. "Look, that doesn't do anything. We spent all of our savings on Lily's education. There is nothing left for you, Cameron. I'm sorry, but that's simply how things are. You'll work at my cousin Frank's restaurant after graduation." I turned and ran, ignoring their calls. I rushed up the stairs to my room, slamming the door so hard that the walls trembled. As I dropped into my bed, sobbing coursing through my body, I felt something inside me tighten. "Fine," I thought, stiffening my fists. "If they don't help me, I'll find another method. I'll show them all Cameron can do." The following several months were a blur. Lily left for college, accompanied by sad goodbyes and triumphant parental embraces. Meanwhile, I redoubled my efforts in my studies, aiming to graduate at the top of my class. During this period, I found myself spending increasingly more time with Great Aunt Maggie. Her little pleasant abode became my safe haven from the stress at home. One afternoon, while we sipped tea in her bright kitchen, she asked me the question I had been dreading. "So Cameron," she asked, her sympathetic eyes fixated on my, "what are your plans after graduation?" I looked into my teacup, fighting back tears. I'm not sure, Aunt Maggie. Mom and Dad will not assist me with college. They claim there is no money left after paying for Lily's education." Maggie was quiet for a time before reaching across the table and squeezing my hand. "Cameron, dear, I have some savings. I would like to give these to you for college. You're as brilliant as a whip, and I'll be damned if I waste that brain of yours." The reality of her words struck me like a tidal wave. I fell into tears, stunned by her generosity and the understanding that my dreams had not died after all. "Thank you," I sobbed and threw my arms around her. "Thank you so much, Aunt Maggie." The months passed quickly, and before I knew it, I was going across the stage at graduation, diploma in hand. As I searched the crowd, I noticed Aunt Maggie smiling at me. My parents were also present, looking proud but uncomfortable. Mom strolled in one evening as I was poring over college brochures. "Cameron, honey," she continued, her voice syrupy sweet, "your father's cousin Frank has called. He has a waitressing position for you at his restaurant. Isn't this exciting?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, Mom, I won't need that job. I am going to college." Dad appeared at the doorway, unhappy. "And how exactly do you plan to pay for that?" "Aunt Maggie is assisting me," I stated, my chin held high. "She's giving me her savings for tuition." The stunned hush that ensued was almost hilarious. Then, to my surprise, Dad's face became red with fury. "Absolutely not," he exclaimed. "If Maggie has any money to spare, it should go to Lily. She wants a car for her advertising job following graduation next year." I couldn't believe what I heard. "Are you serious?" I spit. "This is my chance to get an education, to make something of myself." "Don't be selfish, Cameron," Mom interjected. Your sister needs that money more than you do. No, I replied, my voice shaky but firm. This is my money now, and I'm spending it on education. End of discussion. From then on, living at home became miserable. My parents either ignored me totally or yelled at me for the tiniest things. The tension was suffocating. After a particularly scathing dispute, I called Aunt Maggie in tears and revealed everything. Pack your bags, sweetheart, she stated without hesitation. You're moving in with me. The next day I packed my belongings into a cab and drove away, watching my childhood home shrink in the rearview mirror. As I drove up to Aunt Maggie's house, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The summer went by in a blur of preparation, and before I knew it I was walking onto the campus of State University. Thanks to my excellent grades and Aunt Maggie's generosity, I was accepted into the management program of my dreams. My first day of school, I felt like I was flying on air. As I sat in my Introduction to Business course, taking in every word, I couldn't help but think, I did it. I'm actually here. Meanwhile, Lily began her final year at her posh institution. I hadn't heard much from her or my parents since I moved out, but I tried not to be concerned. I was too busy enjoying my newfound independence and the exhilaration of college life. However, around a month into the semester, Aunt Maggie phoned me. Cameron, dear, she started tentatively, I think you should sit down for this. My pulse raced as she told me about the family drama I had missed. Lily apparently showed up at home unexpectedly, expressing her decision to drop out of college. What's the reason? She was pregnant. Aunt Maggie claimed Lily had been cavalier about the whole situation. Oh, don't worry, she'd said, tossing her hair. The baby's father is wealthy. We'll get married soon. But the narrative did not stop there. It came out that Lily's boyfriend was not as serious as she imagined. When he discovered she'd also been sleeping with his pal, all hell broke loose. They didn't even know who the father was. Aunt Maggie sighed. I sat there, phone pressed against my ear, trying to digest everything. Part of me felt a sick sense of satisfaction. The golden child had fallen from her pedestal. But ultimately, I was sad for Lily and the mess she had gotten herself into. The saga continued for several months. Aunt Maggie kept me informed of all the gossip from the family parties I no longer attended. When Lily's kid was born, a DNA test proved that her boyfriend was the father. But instead of the fairy tale wedding Lily had hoped for, he just agreed to pay child support. The ultimate blow came when Lily, desperate for employment, accepted a position as a server at Uncle Frank's restaurant, the same job my parents had tried to force on me. As I hung up the phone, I experienced a flurry of emotions. A small, petty part of me wanted to brag, to rub my accomplishment in my family's faces. But ultimately, I felt deeply grateful for where I was and how far I'd come. 4 years passed in a flurry of lectures, tests and late-night study sessions. Before I knew it, I was walking across the stage at graduation, clutching my hard-earned management degree. As I searched the crowd, I noticed Aunt Maggie smiling at me, tears of pride in her eyes. My outstanding grades and glowing references from my instructors helped me obtain a job as a manager at the Gilded Fork, one of the city's most prominent restaurants. The compensation exceeded my expectations, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly accomplished. I knew what I wanted to accomplish after receiving my first paycheck. I marched into the electronics store and purchased the most recent smartphone for Aunt Maggie. Her face brightened up as I showed it to her. "Oh, Cameron," she said, turning the sleek device over in her hands. "This is too much." I grinned and pulled out my own phone. "Not at all. Now let me show you how to utilize it." I spent the following 3 weeks teaching Aunt Maggie the ins and outs of social media. She took to it like a duck to water, particularly enjoying Facebook's video feature. Her page quickly filled up with videos of her garden, cat, and the fabled apple pie in various stages of preparation. During my lunch breaks, I'd view her videos and give comments and likes. It was our method of remaining in touch, even when work kept me busy. My phone buzzed one day when I was getting ready for the dinner rush. I looked at it, astonished to find my mother's name on the screen. We hadn't spoken for years. "Cameron," she said hesitantly. "We were hoping you might come over to talk." After a lengthy delay, I consented. That Sunday, I was standing on the porch of my boyhood house, my hand hanging over the doorbell. Before I could press it, the door opened. "Cameron!" My mother drew me into a close hug. "Oh, sweetie, it's so good to see you." Inside, I found my father, Lily, and a toddler who I assumed was my niece. The atmosphere was tense, but not aggressive, as I had imagined. "You look good, kiddo," Dad observed, his tone stern yet loving. "We hear you're doing well for yourself." I nodded, being apprehensive. "I am. I currently work as a manager at the Gilded Fork. Their eyes opened at the restaurant's name. Mother cleared her throat. That's amazing, sweetie. Actually, that is one of the reasons we wanted to speak with you. Over the next hour, they apologized for how they had treated me, confessing their mistake and dismissing my potential. Then came the true reason for the gathering. Cameron, Mom remarked, looking at Lily. We were wondering if you might be able to help Lily get a job at your restaurant. I looked at my sister, who was bouncing her daughter on her knee. She refused to meet my gaze. I'll see what I can do, I concluded. No promises, but I'll ask. True to my word, I spoke with the restaurant owner, Mr. Reeves, about Lily. To my astonishment, he agreed to give her a chance as administrator. Lily began the following week. I watched her intently, half expecting her to fail or make trouble, but to my surprise, she excelled. She was punctual and efficient, and her customers adored her charm. As the weeks went, I found myself becoming more relaxed with her. We weren't best buddies by any means, but we had a good professional connection. Just when I thought I had it all figured out, the universe decided to throw me another curveball, this time a good one. Mr. Reeves called me into his office one day. My heart raced, and I wondered whether I had done something wrong. Instead, he winked at me and asked, Cameron, how would you like to help me expand the business? Before I knew it, I was overseeing the opening of 3 more restaurants. My days became a blur of staff meetings, food tastings, and data crunching. It was grueling, exhilarating, and all I could have imagined. The promotion included a large pay increase, and I suddenly found myself with more money than I knew what to do with. That's when my parents' calls started. At first, it was just minor issues. The roof is leaking, Mom would say, her tone apprehensive. We were wondering if you might be able to help out a little. I was amazed at how nice it felt to say yes and fix their difficulties with a simple transfer of dollars. It began with the roof, then a new water heater, and before long, I was financing a full home restoration. As their financial position improved, thanks to my monthly allowance, the famed family parties resumed. However, when I attended, things were different. Have you heard about Cameron's latest project? Mom would gush to her family. She is opening a new restaurant downtown. We are so proud of her. When I caught Lily's eye across the room, she gave me a little smile. She was also doing well, having been appointed to head administrator at the Gilded Fork. My girls, Dad would say, putting one arm around each of us. Both of them making their old man proud. A part of me wanted to be bitter, to remind them of how they had treated me previously, but a greater part savored in the warmth of their approval, something I'd coveted for so long. As I drove home that night, I felt a wave of contentment rush over me. After all these years, I finally got everything I'd always wanted. Professional achievement and the love and appreciation of my family. I was the golden kid now, but more importantly, I was my own woman, able to stand on my own 2 feet. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when my world collapsed around me. I was sipping my coffee and surfing through Facebook when I noticed Aunt Maggie had posted a new video. It was from one of the family events I had missed because of job obligations. I smiled and clicked play, expecting to witness the usual scenes of laughter and merriment. What I saw instead caused my blood to run cold. My parents appeared in full color, their cheeks flushed with drink and self-righteousness. Mom was gesticulating madly, her voice slurred yet clear. And Cameron, that ungrateful little freeloader, she said. She rarely provides us anything. We're not made of money, you understand? Dad joined in, his cheeks flushed. That's correct. We're doing okay, thanks to Lily. She's the one who keeps that pricey restaurant going. Cameron only rides on her coattails. The video proceeded with several families nodding and expressing their own criticisms. Lily sat in the corner, looking uncomfortable but not challenging them. As the film concluded, I sat there shocked. How could they? After everything I'd done for them, all the money I'd given them, how could they turn around and say such horrible, false things? With trembling palms, I scrolled down to the comments. I noticed a torrent of messages from my folks. Maggie, erase this video right away. You have no right to post that. Take it down immediately. But Aunt Maggie's reaction brought me to tears. I'm not sure how to delete videos, and even if I could, I wouldn't. It's time everyone knew the truth about how you treat Cameron. She's the one that helps you, and this is how you reciprocate her kindness. Shame on you both. I stayed there for what seemed like hours, watching the video and rereading the comments. The treachery struck deep, reopening scars that I believed were healed. I finally picked up the phone and dialed Aunt Maggie's number. Oh, Cameron dear, she replied in response, her voice filled with sorrow. I take it you've seen the video? Yeah, I said, my throat scratchy from crying. I cannot believe it, Aunt Maggie. How could they? I could hear the rage in her voice when she responded. They have always been like this, Cameron. You just haven't been there to witness it. I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but it might be for the best. You deserve to know the truth. We talked for hours, Aunt Maggie supporting me while I alternated between disbelief, rage, and grief. As darkness fell, I reached a decision. I'm cutting them off, I told Aunt Maggie, my voice steady despite my sadness. There's no more money. There is no more aid. They made their bed and now they may lie in it. The days following the video disclosure were some of the most difficult of my life. My phone was continuously buzzing with messages and calls from my folks, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Their comments, so nasty and false, ran on repeat in my thoughts. After a week of stillness, I wrote them a short, frigid text. I've watched the video, I know exactly what you think of me, do not contact me again. The money stops now. Their responses poured in immediately. At first they apologized. Cameron, we're very sorry, we did not mean any of it. Please forgive us? But as the days passed and I remained silent, their melody shifted. We are your parents. You owe us. Each message twisted the knife deeper, but I remained steadfast. I had given them numerous opportunities, but they had all turned them down. It was time to stop the loop. Lily, strangely, remained out of it. At work, she was the epitome of efficiency and professionalism. If she felt any anger at losing our parents' financial assistance, she didn't show it. Our interactions were pleasant but distant. I'm not taking sides, she told me one day, following a staff meeting. It's between you and them. I nodded, respecting her impartiality, even if a part of me wished she would advocate for me. But I understood, she needed to focus about her own child right now. As the weeks progressed to months, I found myself relying greatly on Aunt Maggie. Our Sunday video conversations were the highlight of my week. She'd regale me with stories from her garden or her most recent baking escapade, delivering a much-needed dose of normalcy in the midst of my chaotic life. You're doing the right thing, Cameron, she'd tell me when I had reservations. Don't let them manipulate you anymore. To my astonishment, more relatives began to approach out. Cousin Sarah, who had always been nice to me at family occasions, wrote me a meaningful email. I watched the video. Cameron, I want you to know that I believe you're fantastic. What you've accomplished, how you've assisted everyone, you're an inspiration. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. Uncle Bob, Dad's brother, called me unexpectedly. Kid, I've watched you grow into this beautiful woman. Your parents are fools if they don't recognize how unique you are. Keep in mind that you have relatives on your side. These words of encouragement were like balm to my broken heart. I understood that, while I had lost my parents, I had gained a family that valued me for who I was. As the year came to a close, Mr. Reeves invited me into his office. I went in anxious, wondering if the family stress had influenced my professional performance. Instead, he smiled warmly and announced, Cameron, I am retiring next year. I want you to take over as CEO of the restaurant group. I stood there, stunned into silence. Finally, I stammered out, Are you sure? He nodded, his eyes sparkling. I have never been more certain about anything in my life. You've earned it, Cameron. You are the reason this firm has thrived. It's time you took control. As I exited his office, my mind racing with possibilities, I realized something profound. The little girl who had been overlooked and undervalued had grown into a lady who had exceeded everyone's expectations, even her own.